The king was moved by her grace. He'd been moved thus once before in his life, taken by surprise even more suddenly, which helps to explain the impression Mademoiselle de Hautefort made on this enigmatic man. On a journey to the provinces, he had, in a small town, attended a ball. Toward the end of the performance, one of the dancers, a certain Go, the courtesan, had stepped gracefully onto a chair and raised a wooden candlestick holding a simple tallow candle. The king, when chaffed about his distaste for women, always recounted this story, saying this young woman had performed this act with such delicacy that he fell in love with her on the spot, and, upon leaving the city, had sent her 30,000 livres for her virtue. Only he didn't say whether he sent her the 30,000 livres because he wanted to defend her virtue or possess it for himself. The king was taken no less suddenly by the lovely Marie de Hautefort than he'd been by the virtuous Go the courtesan. Upon returning to the chateau, he inquired as to who was the ravishing person he'd seen in the chapel, and learned she was the granddaughter of Madame de la Flotte, arrived that day in the household of Queen Marie de Medici to be one of her maidens. And that very day, to the astonishment of everyone, and to the great satisfaction of those involved in the matter, he made a complete change in the royal routine. Instead of staying locked in his darkest room, as he'd done for a month in the Louvre, and for the last week at Fontainebleau, he went out and about, in his carriage or walking in the park, as if seeking someone. And in the evening he came to visit the queens, as he hadn't done since the departure of Mademoiselle de Lautrec, to spend the evening chatting with the lovely Marie, and to inquire where she'd be the following day. The next morning he sent a letter by courier to Bois-Robert, summoning him to Fontainebleau with all haste. Bois-Robert was amazed by this mark of favour, which was the sort of thing he expected from Richelieu, but not from the king. His surprise was even greater when Louis led him to a window embrasure, pointed out Mademoiselle de Hautefort, who was walking on the terrace, and told him he wanted a verse written about that particular lovely lady. Astonished though he was, Bois-Robert didn't have to be asked twice. He praised Mademoiselle de Hautefort's beauty, and, learning that she was called Aurora, said he could have sought high and low, and found no better name for her dawn-like loveliness. It gave him, moreover, a subject for his verse. In his poem, Louis XIII, under his sometime title of Apollo, Apollo was the god of the lyre, and Louis XIII, as we know, liked to compose music, begged dawn not to rise so early and vanish so quickly. Desiring her since the beginning of the world, he pursued her daily in his horse-drawn celestial chariot without ever quite reaching her, always seeing her disappear just as he reached out his hand to touch her. The king read this verse and approved it, except for one point. "This is fine, Le Bois," he said, "but remove the word desiring." "Why is that, Majesty?" asked Bois-Robert. "Because I don't desire." There was no answer to that. Desiring was edited out. As for the king, he set music to Bois-Robert's words, and words and music were sung by his official musicians, Molinier and Justin, who, given the importance of the matter, wore their most splendid attire. The two queens, and especially Anne of Austria, applauded the poetry of Bois-Robert and the melody of the king. Louis XIII performed his Easter rites. His confessor, Suffren, who was in on the scheme, soothed His Majesty's conscience, citing the example of the patriarchs, who were unfaithful to their wives without inviting the wrath of the Lord. But the king assured him that there was no such danger, as his love for Mademoiselle de Hautefort was pure and without sin. Not so Madame de Fargy and company, who definitely had sin in mind. For a mind like Lafargy's, sin was always the object. Once Easter was past, the cabal watched Louis XIII with some anxiety, but he made no move to continue his journey south. Instead, he ordered hunts and banquets, but at both banquets and hunts, though he devoted himself exclusively to Mademoiselle de Hautefort, his conduct toward her was still perfectly respectful. There was one gambit yet to try, to make the king jealous. There existed a certain Monsieur d'Equevilly-Vassé, of the family of Président-en-Équin. Though never finalized, there had been some talk of marriage between him and Mademoiselle de Hautefort. He arrived at Fontainebleau, having been invited by Madame de Fargy with an eye toward making him an object of jealousy, and indeed Monsieur d'Ecqueville seemed inclined to revive his old courtship, despite the unusual attentions the king was paying his intended. Louis XIII took pause and asked Mademoiselle d'Hautefort about the matter, who confirmed that the families had discussed a marriage. And so finally Louis XIII became jealous, and jealous of a woman. The two queens met with Madame de Fargy to figure out how to exploit this jealousy, and Madame de Fargy came up with a scheme. That evening, Gretchen the dwarf, who could approach without question, would speak to Mademoiselle d'Hautefort and awkwardly slip her a perfumed letter in such a way that the king couldn't help but notice. The king would want to know who'd sent such a letter. The rest was up to the queen and Mademoiselle d'Hautefort. That evening, the usual circle gathered around Her Majesty Queen Anne. The king was sitting near Mademoiselle d'Hautefort, cutting out paper dolls. Mademoiselle d'Hautefort was carefully dressed, at the personal instruction of the queen. She wore a low-cut dress of white satin, and her dazzling arms and shoulders, whiter even than her dress, drew the lips like a magnet draws iron. The king, from time to time, passed his eyes over these arms and shoulders, but no more than that. Fargy stared openly. "Ah, sire," she whispered to the king, "if I were a man." Louis XIII frowned. Anne of Austria, adjusting the hem of her dress, also seemed to be looking at this beautiful image in rose-coloured marble. At that moment, little Gretchen crawled out on all fours from between the king's legs. The king thought it was Grisette, his favourite dog, and moved his feet to let her through. The dwarf shrieked as though the king had stepped on her hand. His Majesty stood. Gretchen took advantage of the movement to slip the letter, as clumsily as instructed, into Mademoiselle d'Hautefort's hand. The king couldn't fail to see it. Taking part in this farce made the young woman blush, which served the conspirators' purposes perfectly. The king saw the letter pass from the dwarf's hand to Marie's, and from Marie's hand into a pocket. "The dwarf gave you a letter?" he asked. "Do you think so, sire?" "I know so." There was a brief silence. "Who is it from?" asked the king. "I don't know," said Mademoiselle d'Hautefort. "Then read it, and you'll know." "Later, sire." "Why later?" "There's no hurry. With me, there is. But it seems to me, sire," said Mademoiselle d'Hautefort, "I'm free to receive letters from whomever I like." "Not so." "Why not?" "Not when—" "Not what?" "Not when— not when I love you." "What? You love me?" said Mademoiselle d'Hautefort, laughing. "Yes, but what will Her Majesty the Queen say?" "Her Majesty the Queen says I can't love anyone. This will prove I can." "Bravo, sire!" said the Queen. "In your place I'd want to know who's written to this young lady, and what it says." "But I'm desperate. The king mustn't know," said Mademoiselle d'Hautefort. She rose. "We'll see about that," said the king, and he rose as well. Mademoiselle d'Hautefort backed quickly away. The king made a move to grab her. The door to the queen's boudoir was behind her, and she ran for it. Louis XIII chased her through it, the queen right behind, calling, "Watch your pockets, Hautefort!" The king cornered her and raised his hands, clearly intending to search the girl. But she, knowing the king's prudery, pulled the letter from her pocket and thrust it into her bosom. "Take it from there, sire," she said, and with the shamelessness of innocence, she presented her chest to the king. The king hesitated and dropped his arms. "Take it, sire, take it!" cried the queen, laughing aloud, to the great embarrassment of her husband. To remove the young woman's last defence, she grabbed Mademoiselle d'Hautefort's hands and pinned them behind her back. "Now, sire, take it!" Louis looked around, caught like a sugar cube in silver tongs, and then chastely, without touching her skin, drew the letter from its warm sanctuary. The queen, who hadn't really expected this, released Mademoiselle d'Hautefort's hands and murmured to herself, "I may have no choice but to adopt Fargy's proposal." The letter was from Mademoiselle d'Hautefort's mother. The king read it and, ashamed, returned it. Then all three went back into the salon, each with different emotions. Madame de Fargy was chatting with an officer who just arrived from the army, bringing, he said, important news for the king. "The Comte de Moray," murmured the queen. recognizing the young man she'd seen only 2 or 3 times before, though it was always Madame de Fargy who'd spoken to him. In truth, he was quite handsome. Then she said, even lower, "He does look a bit like the Duke of Buckingham." Was she just noticing it now, or did she suddenly wish, for a reason, to find the resemblance between Richelieu's messenger and the former ambassador of the King of England? Here ends the manuscript of The Red Sphinx. The story of the Comte de Morey and Isabelle de Lautrec continues in The Dove. Part 2. The Dove. 1. May 5th, 1637. Beautiful dove, with your silver plumage, your black collar and pink feet, since your prison seems so cruel that you threaten to batter yourself to death on its bars, I give you your freedom. But as you doubtless want to leave me to rejoin a person you love more, I must justify your week's absence. I need payment for the service I render you in setting you free from eternal captivity, for the heart is selfish, and does nothing without asking payment in return, often at double value. Go then, gentle messenger, go, and by your return, tender these regrets to the person who calls you despite the distance. This note, which I attach to your leg, is the proof of your loyalty. So goodbye. The window opens, and heaven awaits. Farewell. 2. May 6th, 1637. Thank you, whoever you are, for returning my sole companion. But that blessed act must be its own reward. If only the charming messenger who brought me your letter could have known how to thank you, or tell me where you live, for I'd hate you to think me cold and uncaring. But the same restlessness that took her to your home brought her back to mine. Yesterday, Iris was full of the joy of her return to me. However, this morning, how changeable we are! This morning I wasn't enough for her. She beat with her wings and her beak, not at the bars of her cage, for she never had a cage, but at the panes of my window. She is no longer mine alone. She belongs to both of us. Now, my opinion may not be shared by many, but I think that by sharing, we double what we have. From now on, our Iris is not single, but double, and notice how prescient I was in naming her Iris, as if I knew she would become our messenger. Your Iris will bring you my letters, and my Iris will bring me yours, because I hope you will kindly reply to tell me how she came into your hands. It may surprise you that I'm so quick to be familiar with a stranger, an unknown, but I know you must be a good man or woman, since you returned me my dove. Furthermore, the tone of your letter bespeaks a person of distinction and heart. All such noble spirits are sisters, all such refined minds are brothers. So treat me as a brother, or a sister, if you will, because I need to find the brother or sister I never had. Iris, my dear friend, go back to where you came from, to that person I refer to as him or her, and add that I'd rather be thought of as her than as him. Go, Iris, and remember that I'm waiting for you. 3. The same day, as the Angelus tolls. My sister. For the delay, blame neither Iris nor myself. I wasn't in my room when your messenger arrived, but I'd left the window open to catch the first breath of the evening breeze. Iris landed on the windowsill, and as if the charming little creature understood that she had a letter to deliver and a reply to bear away, she patiently awaited my return, and when I came in, she flew to my shoulder. Hélas! In my uneven descent from the heights of human eminence, I've experienced along the way both the heights of joy and depths of sorrow, and I've never felt more sad than when I first sent away your dove, whose name I didn't even know, consigning her to some unknown destination, and then, believing her gone forever, I was never happier than when I found her in my room and felt her cool wing caress my cheek as she alighted on my shoulder. Dear God! For man, the eternal slave of his surroundings, how little it takes to trigger joy and sorrow. The tears of one who has lost a kingdom, who trembled at the wind of the axe as it took the heads of those around him. He cries just the same, watching a bird escape into the heavens, and trembles, feeling the wind from the wings of a dove. This is one of your great mysteries, dear God, and only you, with your divine mysteries, know if you have a more humble and devout worshipper than this one, who prays at the foot of the cross of your Holy Son to bless your glory and greatness. So I thought upon seeing the dear dove I'd thought I'd lost, even before I read the letter she carried. Then, having read the letter, I fell into a deep reverie. What good, I wondered, poor castaway that I am, who have gambled with death and tried to hoodwink the hurricane, what good is it, lost in the immensity of the ocean, to grasp at this drifting plank, the last remnant of my broken ship of life, when Providence is within reach of my hand? Is that temptation worse than the temptation of hope? Aren't I just catching my coat on the edge of the doorway out of this world, just when I thought I was completely done with the vanities and illusions of earthly life? You see, my sister, how much I had to consider. God above my head, the abyss beneath my feet, and around me the world I could no longer see because I'd shut my eyes, no longer hear because I'd stopped my ears. If I listened to the wind, I'd hear the hurricane once more, and carelessly open both eyes and ears. But maybe, with imagination, I'll see beyond my reality. Maybe, if I don't try too hard, I can look beyond the horizon of events. You ask, my sister, for a simple story. I'll tell you one. About a week ago I was sitting in the garden, reading. Would you like to know what I was reading, my sister? It was that treasure of love, religion, and poetry called The Confessions of St. Augustine. As I read it, my thoughts merged with those of that blessed bishop who had a saint for a mother before he was a saint himself. Suddenly I heard a fluttering over my head and, looking up, saw a plummeting dove, pursued by a hawk who already had some of its prey's feathers in its beak. God, who in his majesty regards the fall of a sparrow the same as the crash of an empire, God had told this poor bird, in mortal menace from the hawk, to seek succour with me. In any event, I took hold of the poor thing, trembling and blood-stained, and clutched it to my chest, where it nestled, eyes closed, heart hammering, and I, seeing the hawk watching from the top of a poplar, took it inside to my cell. For 5 or 6 days, the hawk didn't leave its observation post for a moment, and day and night I saw him sitting motionless on his dry branch, watching for his prey. The dove, for its part, doubtless sensed the hawk's presence, for that entire time she sat, sad but resigned, on my windowsill. Finally, the day before yesterday, the hawk disappeared, and the instinct of the prisoner must have told her that her enemy was gone, because almost immediately she began beating herself against the window-pane, so roughly that I feared she'd break it. Suddenly I was no longer a protector, but a jailer, my room no longer a refuge, but a prison. For a whole day I tried to reconcile her with me. For a whole day I held her while she struggled. Yesterday I finally gave in to pity. I wrote the brief letter you received, and then, with tears in my eyes, opened the window through which I expected her to disappear forever. Since then, I often thought about that hawk, sitting still and watchful on the highest branch of the tree, and in it I saw a symbol of the enemy of mankind, always there though we see him not, watching for his prey, querens quem devoret, so he can devour it. And now, since at your desire I've related how your dove came to me, and then brought you my letter, I have a request. Tell me, my sister, how Iris came to leave you, as I've told you how she came to me. Tomorrow, at the first light of dawn, I'll open my window, and your messenger will ride that light back to you, carrying my answer. Meanwhile, may the cherubim we call dreams flit quietly round your bed, cooling your brow with the waft of their wings. 4. May 10th. After matin. I waited 3 days before responding, as you can see by my letter's date. Your letter gave me pause. I had hoped to be calling you sister, but I must either call you brother or renounce writing you altogether. You fear, you say, that you're catching your coat on the edge of the doorway out of this world, so you pass through this world in solitude. You also say you descended from the heights of human eminence. Were you thus at the apex of society, so that your fall should take you so far? You lost a kingdom, and passed under the axe that took the heads of those around you. So you lived among the great? You took part in the struggles of princes? How am I to believe that, with all you've been through, you are yet young, and humble too, claiming to speak from your knees? On the other hand, what point would there be in deceiving me? You don't know me, don't know if I'm a noble or peasant, young or old, ugly or pretty. Besides, it hardly matters whether I know who you are or you know who I am. We are two forlorn creatures, apart from one another, unknown to each other, and powerless to physically meet. But, aside from physical meeting, there is the meeting of minds. Beyond touch and sight of the body, there is the brotherhood of souls, that mysterious agape, in which we drink the Lord's words from the same cup, and bathe in the same glowing aura of the Holy Spirit. That's all I want from you. That's all you want from me. That said, if we find sympathy between our minds, affinity between our souls, what harm can there be in the eyes of God if our minds and souls communicate through space, like the light of two friendly stars crossing the lonely ether of the firmament? Now, this is how poor Iris left my room. The evening before you saved her life, I was kneeling in prayer, my lamp placed near the curtains of my bed. Around midnight, while praying, I fell asleep. Perhaps 10 minutes later, my door, left ajar, was pushed open by the breeze. The wind ruffled my curtains, the lamp flared, and the curtains caught fire. In an instant, my small room was filled with flame. I woke already half suffocated. My poor dove fluttered against the ceiling, struggling amid the smoke. I ran to the window and opened it. It was scarcely open before she rushed through it, and I heard her dart into the branches of her favourite tree, in which she always spends part of the day. Hoping she would return at daybreak, I left my window open. But the day came and went, and she never came back. Terrified by the fire, she had probably taken to her wings. That day was doubtless the one she was pursued by the hawk and came to you for aid. You gathered her in and guarded her, and then, long after I'd believed her lost, I heard her beating her wings against the panes. I opened the window and admitted the runaway, who, though she carried her own excuse, was already forgiven in advance. That's the story of poor Iris. Was that all you wanted to know, or did you have anything more to ask? If not, our messenger will return without a letter. I'll know what that means, and if that's the case, I'll just say now, farewell, my brother. May the Lord be with you. May 11th, at daybreak. Iris returned, without a letter. The poor little thing seemed sad to lose the office of messenger. She raised her empty leg and looked at me, as if to ask what it meant. It means, dear Iris, that you are mine alone, that today the sky will be dark, for the brother was no kin, and the friend was indifferent. And this, little one, I write for myself, this grievance from a soul who laments her isolation. And I say I suffer, and I say I weep, and I say I am unhappy. Alas, your justice, my God, is sometimes unfair. The blows you intend for the guilty are diverted, perhaps by some evil, invisible spirit, to fall on the innocent. The pains of this life prepare us for the happiness of the next, we are told. But why should pain strike one who did nothing worse than make a mistake? That's no crime for which to atone. Didn't Jesus forgive the Magdalene? Didn't Christ bless the adulterous woman? Why this discipline for me, my God? I have loved, it's true, but I responded with love to love from another. I was born for the life of the world, not the life of the cloister. I followed the law of love, imposed by you on all creatures, persons and plants. All must love in this world. All seek to join and merge into a single life. Brooks into streams, streams into rivers, rivers into the ocean. The stars that at night rise from one horizon and cross the sky to the other are swallowed in the glowing aura of a greater star rising. Our souls themselves, these emanations of your divine breath, seek other souls here on earth for companions to love, and when our souls leave our bodies, they seek again to merge with you, who are the soul universal and the love endless. Well, my God, For a moment I rejoiced in the hope, towards the end of my horizon, that I'd found not just another soul, but a sister in suffering. In those first laments, I thought I heard the words of a suffering heart. Why, poor suffering soul, do you not wish to share in my pain as I share in yours? It's a law that shared burdens are lighter, and a weight that would crush two who are alone could be borne by two united. I hear the bell toll. You call me, my God, and I come to you. I go to you in confidence of my purity of heart, a heart open for you to read. If I have, by any act or omission, offended you, my God, please let me know by sign, vision, or revelation, and I will prostrate myself at your altar, forehead in the dust and hands outstretched until you have forgiven me. You, dear dove, be the faithful guardian of these feelings of my weak heart, these thoughts of my poor soul. Fold your wings over this paper that I fold to hide it from all eyes, as I await the next and final half-cup of bitterness. 5. May 11th, at noon. Indeed, you guessed right, my poor suffering soul. I'd resolved not to write to you, because what good, when lying in the grave, comes of raising one's hands from the tomb, if not to raise them to God? But a sort of miracle has changed my resolution. That letter you wrote to yourself, that letter in which you poured out your soul at God's feet, that letter, intimate memento of your mind, half full of the bitterness that was to fill to overflowing with your tears, that letter, the dove, disloyal to you for once, brought to me, not tied to its leg, but in its beak, like the dove of the ark, with the green twig that showed the flood ebbing from the surface of the world, just as tears dry on the face of a forgiven sinner. Be it so. I accept the task you assign me to bear part of your pain, because I see I belong not just to myself, so long as, with the strength God has left to me, I can make of myself a lever to lift others in their misfortune. My soul, from this moment, is empty of its own misfortunes. Pour in yours, as a stream seeks a river, as a lonely meteor seeks a star. You ask why you suffer, having done nothing wrong. Take care. When you question God, you draw near to blasphemy, a short step to a long fall. Down here, pride is our greatest enemy. It's said that a recent philosopher had redefined all of nature as a series of whirlpools. In this philosopher's view, every fixed star is a sun, surrounded by worlds like ours, and all these worlds, subject to the laws of gravity, revolve through space, each around its center of weight, without collision or confusion. Quite a system, isn't it? God grows to infinite greatness, but man shrinks to nothing. So can our world be divided into millions of worlds. Our pride makes each of us believe himself a sun around which all revolves, when we are, at most, a mere atom, one grain of dust that the Lord's breath moves among the stars, greater and lesser, and those called kings, emperors, princes, are champions of earthly power whom God has given, as a sign of their power, a scepter or a crosier, a tiara or a sword. Well, who told you that immaterial things matter less than the material? Who told you the woes of this world don't contribute to the happiness of the next? Who told you that, by the moral laws of nature, one half, the heart, should not weep while the other half knows joy, just as one half the earth is in darkness when the other half is in light? Tell me your troubles, poor, suffering soul, because whatever your misfortunes, they can't compare, I think, to mine. Tell me, and I'll have, I hope, a consolation for each of your complaints, a balm for each of your injuries. But on your side, I beg you, drink from my stream of words without seeking the fountain from which they flow. Drink as the black Ethiopians and pale children of Egypt drink from the Nile, while they think it sacrilege to try to follow the river to its source. Based on a few of my stray words, you thought to read into my past life, to see me as one of the lofty of this world, who has plunged from the heights, thrown down from heaven to earth like a fallen angel. Do not deceive yourself. I am just a humble monk with a humble name. My past, dark or bright, modest or proud, is lost to my memory, and unlike the ancient philosopher who remembered the siege of Troy from another life, in my death I remember no yesterday, and tomorrow I'll know not today. This is how I wish to walk into eternity, erasing every vestige I leave behind me, to arrive before my Lord as I came out of my mother's womb, solus, pauper et nudus, poor, naked, and alone. Farewell, my sister. I will give you everything I can, but do not ask for more than I can give you. 6. May 12th.
Yes, you've understood everything. Yes, I was prostrate at God's feet, asking him to account for my suffering, rather than asking forgiveness for my doubts. Yes, by a kind of miracle, God has restored this consolation I thought I'd lost, and our messenger, through disloyal devotion, carried you what had spilled from my mind, or rather my heart, onto the paper. If you wish to remain unknown, then do so. What matter if the sun is hidden by clouds, or a fire is veiled by smoke, if the sun still shines its light, and the flames still warm? God is also invisible and unknown, but we still feel God's hand extend over the world. I will not tell you I'm a modest and humble woman. I was a noble, I was rich, I was happy. I'm none of those now. I loved a man with all my heart, a man who loved me with all his soul. That man is dead. The cold hand of sorrow has stripped me of my worldly finery. Now I wear religious robes, the habit of limbo, the funeral attire of those who no longer live but are not yet dead. So these are my injuries. I entered a convent to forget the one who died, and remember only God, though sometimes I forget God, and remember only he who is dead. That's why I complain, and lament, and cry to the Lord, God, have mercy on me. Oh, tell me what you've done to empty your soul of the pain that once filled it. Have you put pressure on it, as one pinches a wound? I do all right while I'm praying, yet afterward I find my soul filled again with worldly love, as if the liquor of bitterness had been drained, only to be refilled by ardent spirits from a lake of fire. How do you do it? Your answer will be quite simple, and I know it in advance. I have never loved. But if you have never loved, what right have you to boast that you've suffered? What will we have to say if you say to me, I have never loved? This, though first I asked for your help and consolation, and then had to accept your distance and silence, I had really just passed you by as one passes a marble statue a sculptor has given human form, but in whose chest no heart has ever beat. If you've never loved, then this time I'm the one to say to you, do not reply. We're not of the same world. We haven't lived in the same life. I was fooled by appearances. What reason is there to exchange useless words? You won't understand what I say. I won't understand what you say, for we don't speak the same language. Oh, but if you have loved, if you have, tell me where, tell me who, tell me how, or if you don't want to tell me any of that, talk to me about something else, whatever you like, anything. Tell me about your room, if it faces the east or west, the south or north, if you greet the sun when it appears, if you say goodbye to him as he leaves, or if, eyes dazzled by the blazing southern rays of afternoon, you try to distinguish the face of God in that shimmering radiance. Tell me all this, then tell me more. What you see from your window, plains or mountains, peaks or valleys, streams or rivers, lake or ocean. Tell me all, and it will distract my thoughts from the troubles that plague my mind, and then perhaps my heart, distracted by my thoughts, will manage to forget, if only for a moment. No, no, no. Tell me nothing. I will never forget.
7. May 13th. The one you loved is dead. That's why you still have tears. The one I love betrayed me. That's why I have none. Tell me about your love all you want, but don't ask me to speak of mine. For 4 years I've lived in a monastery, and yet I'm not a monk. Why, you may ask, is that? I'll tell you. When my love, which was my last link to life, failed me, I fell into such despair that I gave myself to God. not from virtue, but from pain. I've waited for this despair to subside, so the Lord wouldn't have to receive me as the abyss receives the blind, but as a generous host receives a weary pilgrim who, after toilsome travels, seeks a night's rest at the end of a long day. I wanted to bring him a strong spirit, not a broken heart, a whole body, and not a cadaver. But now, 4 years after seeking such solitude, though daily purifying myself with prayer, I've not yet dared to trade the habit of a novice for the robes of a monk. My former self still lives in me, and it would be sacrilege to offer so worldly a creature to our heavenly Creator. Now you know as much of my past and private life as I can tell you. As to my present life and situation, here is what I can say. I live not really in a monastery, but rather in a hermitage, built halfway up a hill, in a room with whitewashed walls, lacking all ornament but the portrait of a king for whom I have a special reverence, and an ivory crucifix, a masterpiece of the 16th century, which was given to me by my mother. My window is surrounded by a luxuriant jasmine, whose branches are laden with flowers. They scent my room as they open with the rising sun, on the horizon which is probably toward where you are. For from there I see our dove approaching from afar, and when she leaves I see her start in the same direction, and fly for a mile or so until, dwindling, she merges into the azure sky or grey clouds. Given the lay of the land, dawn has a particular charm for me. It's a view I adore and will try to describe. My horizon is bounded to the south by the high Pyrenees, with their purple slopes and snowy peaks, to the east by a hilly ridge that rises toward the main range, while to the north there stretches, as far as the eye can see, a country of plains, dotted with olive orchards, lined with small streams, among which, like a sovereign receiving the tribute of its subjects, one of the greatest rivers of France majestically winds. The plateau beneath me slopes down from south to north, from the mountains to the plains. It has 3 very different aspects, in the morning, noon, and evening. In the mornings, the sun rises behind a ridge of hills to the east. 10 minutes before it appears, I see a ray of rosy light stream slowly up, until it fans across the sky, darkening the hills to black silhouettes. Through this fan spike the spearheads of early sunlight, all the colours, from brightest pink to fiery yellow. As the sun rises behind the hills, it begins to gild their contours with its rays, the highest hill all aglow until, like a moving fire, ever expanding, the day star itself appears, splendid, gleaming, streaming flames, as if from the crater of some inextinguishable divine volcano. As it rises into the heavens, the life of the earth below is reborn. The tops of the Pyrenees shimmer white and silver, their dark sides slowly lighten from black to purple, and from purple to light blue. As light floods down from over the ridge, day spreads across the plain. The streams glisten like silver strands, the river twists and undulates like a shining ribbon. The birds sing in the oleander bushes, among the pomegranates, in the clumps of myrtle, and an eagle, the king of the sky, soars through the ether, banking around a circuit of a league or more, disappearing and reappearing. At noon, the entire basin I just described becomes a fiery furnace. Lit from top to bottom, the mountains cannot conceal their naked flanks, stony limbs that extend into the granite bones of the earth. Broken sunlight rebounds from shiny rock surfaces. Streams and rivers seem torrents of molten metal. The flowers fade, the leaves bow down, the birds grow silent. Invisible cicadas sing from the branches of creaking pine trees, and the only living movement that animates this baking desert is a green lizard that sometimes climbs my window trellis, or a mottled snake that, coiled in a spiral, pants with its mouth half open, ignoring the midges that pass within range of its fangs. In the evening, life is reborn for a while, like the last flare of a lamp before it goes out. One after another, the cicadas fall silent, their buzzing succeeded by the plaintive but monotonous cries of the crickets. The lizards flee, the snakes disappear, the bushes are agitated by the anxious fluttering of birds seeking lodging for the night. The sun goes down toward the horizon behind me, and as it descends, I see the Pyrenean snows change from soft pink to purple, while the shadows elongate across the plains, filling the spaces between them until, according to natural law, The whole world belongs to darkness. Then all noise ceases. The earthly glow is extinguished. The stars emerge silently from the sky. And in the middle of the night's silence, a single melody unfolds into space. The song of the nightingale, star-lover, dark singer. You asked me what I could see from my window, and I've told you. Fix this triple vision in your mind, and allow your mind to distract your heart, for your salvation in this world is in nothing but this word: forget. 8. May 13th.
Forget. You tell me to forget. Listen to what is happening to me. You must understand, when darkness comes, it brings with it something frightening, something incredible and unnatural. When I sleep, death is no longer death, and the dead return to life. He is next to me, with his long dark hair, his pale face, his manly features imbued with all the nobility of his heritage. He is there. I speak to him. I extend my hand. I cry out, "Are you still alive? And do you still love me?" And he replies that yes, he still lives, and yes, he still loves me. This same vision, undeniable, unrelenting, almost palpable, is repeated every night, only to disappear with the first light of dawn. My God, what must I do to get this nightmare, this vision from the angel of darkness to stop tormenting me? I've prayed at the sacred altar, wrapped holy rosaries around my neck and wrists, laid a crucifix on my chest, and fallen asleep with my hands crossed on the feet of the divine martyr. But all was vain, futile, useless. The day brings me back to God, but the darkness returns me to him. I'm like the queen described by the poet Homer, whose work every day was undone every night. If there were no night, there would be no sleep, and if no sleep, then no dreams. And then maybe I could forget. Can you get God to grant me that?
9. May 14th. All that can be obtained from God through prayer, I'll obtain for you are sorely wounded, and the wound is grievous and deep. Let us pray. 10. May 15th.
I don't know, but somehow, through writing to you, I gain some peace and a certain relief. This is indeed a new turn to my life. I was alone in the world, without family, isolated from all, half in the grave, weeping and desperate, and now, suddenly, I've found a brother, because it seems to me you're like a brother I never knew, one who left France before I was born, but whom I've been waiting and searching for. And now you come at last, revealed, though not present, revealed by voice alone. I cannot see you, but I hear you. I cannot touch, but I listen. You have no idea how the landscape so brilliantly conjured by your pen occupies my thoughts. Let no one deny to me the reality of shared vision, for shared vision exists. By the constant force of my will, your landscape is now reflected in my mind as in a mirror. I see everything, from the rosy morning rays, rising behind the hills, to the creeping grey shadows of evening. I hear everything, from the sound of the flower as it opens its petals to the morning dew, to the song of the nightingale, trilling out into the solitude and silence of the night. And I see it all so clearly that, if I ever found myself within the circle of your vision, I could say, there are the flaming hills, there are the snow-capped mountains, there the silver streams, there the gleaming river, here the pomegranates, here the oleander, here the myrtle, all here. So clearly do I see your hermitage rising above the walls of the garden, with its window veiled by jasmine and vines. Then I see you in your whitewashed cell, kneeling in front of our brother Christ, praying for yourself and especially for me. Tell me, who is the king whose portrait hangs in your cell? This king for whom you have a special reverence, so I, too, can envision this king's portrait, and my reverence can echo yours. But you as well. I would like to see you. Oh, only in my thoughts. Rest assured of that. You said that the you of the past no longer existed, and I should ask only about the person of the present and the future. Let the past fade, then. Tell me how old you are now, and those traits that will help me imagine you clearly. Tell me how and when you came to this hermitage, and what accounts for your bidding farewell to the world. I would also like to know how far you are from me. Is it possible to calculate that distance? You seem so good. I have no fear of tiring you. You seem so learned. I am not afraid to ask the impossible. I shall think about how you might answer, and when you do, I shall think about how you replied. Go, dear dove, fly, and come back soon.
11. May 15th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There, you see, by occupying your mind, I was able for a moment to distract your heart. The soul is not like the body. If one who is soul-sick can forget why he suffers no more. You want me to tell you about me, to see if you can find something to like in this man, physical or moral, alive or dead. Well, listen. I was born at Fontainebleau on May 1st, 1607, so my age is 30 years and 14 days. I'm sturdy of frame, brown-haired, blue-eyed, with a pale complexion and high forehead. I retired from the world on January 17th, 1633, when I took a vow that, unless something occurred to change my destiny, I would devote myself to God for the next 5 years, which would be my last. I withdrew from the world in the aftermath of a great political disaster that swallowed up my dearest friends, and after a deep personal injury that broke my heart. The portrait of the king that hangs in my cell, for whom I have a special reverence, is of King Henri IV. Now, you wanted to know the distance between us. It's now just short of 3 o'clock. I'll date this letter at 3 o'clock exactly, the time I shall release our messenger. Pigeons fly at 15 or 16 miles per hour, as I learned when I was in a circumstance to employ them. Note the time you receive this letter, and calculate. Don't reply for 2 or 3 days. Take those days to imagine me, poor recluse, and then put your ideas, whether illusion or reality, on paper. Then send me a summary of your research, the distillation of your dreams. God be with you. 12. May 15th, 2 hours after receiving your letter.
Listen. Hear me. It's not in 2 or 3 days I must answer you, but now. My God, what mad idea grips my mind, my heart, my soul? What if the one I love is not dead? What if you are the one I love, the one I call, the one I seek, the one who appears to me every night? You were born on May 1st, 1607. So was he. You're strong. Like him, you are brown-haired, blue-eyed, with a pale complexion and high forehead. Like him. Then remember the words you told me in another letter, which remain alive in my memory. You fell from the heights of human eminence. You trembled at the wind of the axe as it took the heads of those around you, and in your fall, you lost a kingdom. I don't know how all these things can apply to you, but if they do, my God, it must really be you. You have in your cell a portrait of a king whom you love and revere, a portrait of King Henri IV, and he was the son of King Henri IV. If you are not Antoine de Bourbon, Comte de Moray, said to have been killed at the Battle of Castelnaudary, then who are you? Answer me, in the name of heaven. Answer me.
13. May 16th, at daybreak. If you are not Isabelle de Lautrec, whom I believed unfaithful, then who are you? I am Antoine de Bourbon, Comte de Moray, whom all think died at the Battle of Castelnaudary, but who lives, not by the mercy but by the vengeance of the Lord. Oh, if things are as I fear they are, then woe to us both. The dove must have gotten lost in the night, or perhaps she got tired and was forced to rest. She didn't arrive until the first light of dawn. 14.
May 16th, 7 in the morning. Yes, O sufferer, yes. I'm Isabelle de Lautrec. You believed me unfaithful? Me? How? Why? For what reason? To defend myself. I must know. Did you know the dove takes only 2 hours to go from you to me or me to you? Did you know there must be only 30 miles between us? Tell me, how have I deceived you? How have I betrayed you? Speak. Fly, dove. You carry my life.
15. May 16th, 11 o'clock. The eyes, the heart, the soul can all be deceived at once. Are you or are you not the Isabelle de Lautrec I saw enter Valence Cathedral on January 5th, 1633? Are you not she who dressed as a bride, and who walked behind Emmanuel, Vicomte de Ponty, dressed as a groom? Or was it all an illusion of the arch-fiend? No quibbles, no hesitation, no half-answers. Proof or silence? 16.
May 16th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Proof? You shall have it. It's easy enough to provide. Everything you saw had the appearance of truth, yet everything you saw was false. But I have a long story to tell you, and alas, our poor dove is exhausted and needs rest. Instead of the usual 2 hours, it took her nearly 4 hours to fly back to me. I'll write part of the story tonight. Dear Lord God, give me some peace. My hand trembles so, I can barely hold the pen. But first, my God, I must give thanks to you for letting him see. There. I spent 3 hours on my knees, praying, pressing my burning forehead against the chilly flagstones, and now I'm calmer. To return to you. Let me tell you all, tell you everything, from the moment I left you in Valence to that woeful moment when I pronounced my vows. The night you left, do you remember it as well as I do? It was August 14th, 1632 when we parted. You said goodbye to me without telling me where you were going. I was full of foreboding. I couldn't let go of the edge of your cloak. It seemed to me it wasn't to be a parting for a few days, as you'd promised, but a parting forever. 11 o'clock was tolling from the church in the town. Wearing a dark cloak, you mounted a white horse. You rode slowly at first, and 3 times you turned back to say goodbye. The 3rd time you made me go inside, because you said if I stayed in the doorway, you might never leave. Why didn't I stay? Why did you go? I went in, but only to run up to my balcony. You looked back and saw me waving a handkerchief wet with my tears. You lifted your hat, plumes fluttering, and I heard your farewell waft on the wind, diminished by distance to no more than a sigh. A great cloud drifted across the sky and obscured the moon. I raised my hands, as if to stop it, before it could cut off the silver radiance by which I could still see you. Finally, like a dark aerial monster, it opened its mouth and swallowed the pale goddess, who disappeared within it. When I lowered my eyes to the horizon, I sought for you in vain. I could still hear the sound of hooves ringing on the road in the direction of Orange, but I could see you no more. Suddenly a flare tore open the cloud, and by the lightning's gleam I glimpsed your white horse. But you, in your dark cloak, had already merged with the night. Your mount rode away quickly, but seemingly without a rider. Twice more the lightning flashed to reveal your horse, fading like a ghost. Then even the sound of the hooves was lost. A 4th flash came with a roar of thunder, but the horse was gone. All that night the thunder growled, while the wind and rain beat against my windows. The next day, nature, distraught, dishevelled, and drained, seemed to grieve like my heart. I knew what was happening in the direction toward which you disappeared, that is to say, in Languedoc. It was said your friend the Duc de Montmorency, who was governor there, had joined the party of Monsieur and the exiled Queen Mother. Prince Gaston had crossed France to meet the Duc de Montmorency, raise the province in revolt, and muster troops to march against the king and Monsieur de Richelieu. So you went, to join one of your brothers to fight against the other, and far more dangerous, to draw your sword and risk your head against terrible Cardinal Richelieu, who had already broken so many swords and taken so many heads. As you know, my father was in Paris with the king, so I followed you south with 2 of my ladies, under the pretext of a visit to my aunt, who was abbess of Saint-Pont, but really to get closer to the theatre of events, in which you were to play a role. It took me 8 days to travel from Valence to Saint-Pont. I arrived at the convent on August 23rd. The holy women there were unused to affairs of the world, but the events occurring nearby were so grave. They were the subject of all conversations, and every inhabitant of the convent was discussing the news. And what had they heard? They said the king's brother, Monseigneur Gaston d'Orléans, had met up with Maréchal Duc de Montmorency, bringing 2,000 men he'd raised in the Principality of Trier, and these, added to the 4,000 already with Montmorency, brought their total troops to 6,000. With these 6,000 soldiers, he held Lodève, Albi, Uzès, Lunel, and Saint-Pont, where I was. Nîmes, Toulouse, Carcassonne, and Béziers, though populated by Protestants, had refused to join him. It was also said that 2 armies were on the march against the Duc de Montmorency. One of them, commanded by Marshal Schomberg, was coming by way of Pont-Saint-Esprit. The other, led by the king, as the cardinal had decided Louis XIII himself was needed in the theatre of war, was said to have arrived at Lyon. A letter that caught up to me from Valence not only confirmed this news, but informed me that my father, the Baron de Lautrec, was with His Majesty. This letter came from my father, and also announced that he and his old friend the Comte de Ponty had decided to strengthen the ties between our 2 houses by a marriage between me and the Count's son, the Vicomte de Ponty. As you'll remember, I'd already spoken to you of this proposed marriage, and you'd said to me, "Just give me 3 months. In 3 months things will be different for everyone. Give me 3 more months, and I'll ask the Baron de Lautrec for your hand." Imagine my torment at knowing you were allied with those my father called rebels, as fear and hatred grew between your house and that of my father, a loyal and faithful servant of the king. In his mind, the king and the cardinal were one, and almost daily he announced, "He who is enemy to the cardinal is enemy to the king." On August 23rd, a royal decree declared the Duc de Montmorency attainted, forfeiting all honours and dignities, property and domains, and ordering him to appear before the Parliament of Toulouse for trial. The next day, the rumour spread of a similar declaration against you, son of a king though you were, and against Monsieur de Rieux. Imagine the feeling these rumours inflicted on my poor heart. On the 24th, an emissary of the cardinal passed through Saint-Pont, going, they said, to offer peace terms to Monsieur de Montmorency. I persuaded my aunt to offer him refreshments, and he accepted, stopping in her parlour. I spoke with him there, and what they said of his mission was true. It gave me hope. My hope increased when I heard that the Archbishop of Narbonne, a close friend of Monsieur de Montmorency, had passed through Carcassonne for the same purpose, to ask the Marshal-Duke to lay down his arms. The proposals he was carrying to the governor of Languedoc were, they said, fair, reasonable, and conducive to his fortune and honour. The rumour soon followed that Montmorency had refused. As to you, because, you understand, you were the subject of much talk, which was a cause of both consolation and dread for me. As to you, it was said that a letter had been written to you by the cardinal himself, but you had replied that your word had long been promised to Monsieur, and that Monsieur alone could release you. And alas, that selfish coward refused to let you go. On August 29th, word came that the armies of Marshal Schomberg and the Duc de Montmorency were face to face. But the wily old marshal knew that Richelieu was a minister who could fall, and the king was a man who could die, and that Monsieur, against whom he was pitted, was heir to the throne, and would then become King of France. So he sent Monsieur de Cavois to parley, and open one last negotiation. We heard all the reports. My soul rose at each bit of hopeful news. I anxiously awaited Monsieur de Montmorency's final answer. You know his response. Whether from despair or conceit, fear or courage, he said, "First we'll fight. After the battle we'll talk." Thereafter, since all hope of accord was lost, and a victory by the Duc de Montmorency was your only salvation, I forgot my duty as a daughter, I forgot my duty as a subject, and prostrate at the altar, I prayed to God Almighty to look with favour on the hero of Vellano and the son of the victor of Ivry. From that moment I lived only to wait upon news of the battle. Alas! On September 1st, at 5 in the evening, came the terrible, fatal, heartbreaking news. The battle was lost. The Marshal Duke was a prisoner, and you were either mortally wounded or dead. I didn't wait to hear any more. I went to fetch the gardener, whom I'd spoken to in advance. I told him to prepare 2 horses and meet me at nightfall at the garden gate. The night came. I met him, and we mounted and rode for the battlefield. We skirted the base of the mountains, crossed 2 or 3 streams, passed on the left the little village of Levinière, and reached Gonne at 8 o'clock, where we stopped. My horse was lamed and limping. I determined to trade him for a fresh horse and discover what news I could. They said Montmorency and de Rieux were both dead. As to you, reports were conflicting. Some said you were dead, others mortally wounded. If you were dying, I wanted to close your eyes. If dead, I wanted to wrap you in your shroud. We left Gonne at 8:30, crossing the fields and avoiding the roads. The gardener was from Cessac. He knew the country, and took us straight to Montolieu. The weather resembled that of the night we parted. Dark clouds rolled across heaven, gusts roared through the trees, and a warm, suffocating wet wind spat large drops of rain, while thunder rumbled behind Castelnaudary. We rode straight through Montolieu, without stopping. Beyond that small town, we met the first outpost of Monsieur de Schomberg's troops. I repeated my questions. The battle had begun around 11 in the morning and lasted an hour or less. Barely 100 people had been killed. I asked if you were among the dead. They weren't sure, but I'd heard a soldier of the vanguard say he'd seen you fall. We found him. He had indeed seen one of the leaders go down, but wasn't sure it was you. I wanted to take him with me, but he was on duty and couldn't come. But he told the gardener it was definitely the Comte de Morey who'd led the charge, and if he'd been killed, it was by an officer of Fusiliers named Bitterron. As I listened to these details, a chill came over me. My chest froze so I couldn't speak, and beads of sweat rolled down my face to mingle with my tears. We resumed our journey. We'd come 12 or 13 leagues in 5 hours, but as I'd changed horses in Gonne, I knew I could make it to Castelnaudary. If the gardener fell behind, he promised to keep up by linking his reins with mine. Leaving Montolieu, we passed patrols in the woods. We recognized our location and found our way to a ford over the Bernasson. After crossing 2 more streams, we were well on our way again. Between Ferral and Villespie, the gardener's horse fell and couldn't get up again, but fortunately, we were almost there. We could see the bivouacs of the Royal Army, and saw lights moving about the field where the battle had taken place. My companion told me the lights were probably those of soldiers out to bury the dead. I asked him to make one last effort to follow me. I dug my spurs into my horse, itself ready to fall, and rode past the first campfire. I was just passing the village of Saint-Papoul on my right, when my horse reared. I bent down to see a shapeless mass, a dead soldier. I had found the first corpse. I jumped from my horse and left it to its own devices. We had arrived. The gardener ran toward the nearest group of torches. I sat on a grassy hillock and waited. The sky was still strewn with dark clouds, and thunder continued to rumble in the west, the occasional flash lighting the battlefield. The gardener returned, carrying a torch and followed by some soldiers. He had found them digging a large pit, and looked to check for bodies, but none had yet been thrown in. Finally, I began to get some positive news. Monsieur de Montmorency, though wounded 12 times over, was not yet dead, but he was definitely a prisoner. He had been captured and then carried to a farm 1/4 of a mile from the battlefield, where he'd made his confession to Monsieur de Schomberg's chaplain. Then his wounds had been dressed by the surgeon of the light horse, and he'd been brought to Castelnaudary on a litter. Monsieur de Rieux had been killed, and his body positively identified. As for you, you'd been seen falling from your horse, but after that, no one could say what had become of you. I asked where you'd been seen to fall, and was told it was at the ambuscade. The soldiers wanted to know who I was. "Look at me," I said to them, "and guess." Sobs choked my voice, and tears streamed down my face. "Poor woman," one of them said. "She loves him." I seized the man's hand. I could have kissed him. "Come with me," I said, "and help me find him, dead or alive." "We'll help you," said 2 or 3 soldiers. "Follow us," one of them said. The one I'd chosen to be our guide took the torch and lit the way. I came after. One of them offered to let me lean on him. "Thank you," I said, "but I'm strong enough." In fact, I felt no fatigue, and it seemed to me I could go to the end of the world if I had to. We walked 300 paces. Every 10 steps there was a body, and I wanted to check to see if it was you. But the soldiers drew me forward, saying, "It wasn't here, madame." Finally we came to a little ravine beneath some olive trees, where a path ran along a stream. "Here," the soldiers said. I passed my hand over my forehead and staggered, feeling faint for a moment. Then we began the search, starting down from the crest. I took the torch from the guide and bent low to the earth. One after another I checked every body. 2 were face down, one dressed as an officer, with dark hair like yours. I turned him on his back and parted his hair. It wasn't you. Suddenly I cried out. I'd spotted your hat. I stooped and picked it up. There were the plumes. I'd put on it myself. There was no mistaking it. This was where you had fallen. But had you fallen dead, or only wounded? That was the question. The soldiers who'd come with me were speaking in low voices. I saw one of them gestured toward the stream. "What are you saying?" I asked. "We were saying, madame," replied the one who'd gestured, "that a wounded man, especially one who's shot, is always thirsty. If the Comte de Moray was only wounded, perhaps he crawled to the stream at the bottom of the ravine to drink." "Oh, it's a hope," I cried. "Come!" I darted through the olive trees. The slope was steep, but I barely noticed. Ceres, torch in hand, seeking for lost Persephone, could have gone no quicker, goddess though she was. In an instant I was beside the stream. In fact, 2 or 3 of the wounded had tried to reach it. One had died on the way, the second had gotten his hand into the stream, but no more. The third had his head in the water, and had died while drinking. One of the 3 sighed. It was the man who had reached the edge of the stream and then passed out. The coolness of the night air, or some miracle, had brought him around. I knelt beside him, lit his face with the torch, and uttered a cry. It was Armand, your squire. At the sound, he opened his eyes and looked at me, confused. His eyes focused on my face. "Water," he croaked. I fetched the water in your hat and brought it to him. One of the soldiers stopped me. "Don't let him drink," he said in my ear. "Sometimes they die while drinking." "Water," the dying man repeated. "Yes," I said. "I'll let you drink, but first tell me what happened to the Comte de Moray." He looked more closely at my face and recognized me. "Mademoiselle de Lautrec," he murmured. "Yes, Armand. It's me," I said. "I'm looking for your master." "Where is he? Where is he?" "Water," he demanded, voice fading. I remembered I had a vial of smelling salts in my pocket. I held it to his lips, and he seemed to revive a little. "Where is he, in heaven's name?" I asked. "I don't know," he replied. "Did you see him fall?" "Yes." "Dead or wounded?" "Wounded." "Where did this happen?" "On the banks." "Which side?" "The side toward Fondeilles. Among the king's troops or Montmorency's?" "Montmorency's men." "And then?" "That's all I can remember. I was wounded myself. My horse was killed. I fell. Night came, and I crawled because I was so thirsty. I nearly reached the stream, but I fainted. Water! Water!" "Let him drink now," the soldier said. "He's told us all he knows." I cupped water from your hat. The soldiers raised the wounded man's head, and I brought the water to his lips. He drank 3 or 4 sips, greedily, and then leaned back, sighed, and stiffened. He was dead. "You see, you had to make him talk before letting him drink," said the soldier. He released poor Armand's head, and it fell heavily to the ground. I stood for a moment, wringing my hands anxiously. "What do we do now, madame?" asked the gardener. "Do you know which way is Fondy?" I asked him. "Yes." "Then we go toward Fondy." I turned to the soldiers and asked, "Who will come with me?" "All of us," they said. "Then let's go." We followed the path up out of the ravine, then over into a meadow, where we saw an officer at the head of a dozen soldiers. My companions spoke softly to each other. "What are you saying?" I asked. "We say that officer might be able to give you some information." "Which one?" "That one." They pointed at the captain leading the patrol. "Why do you think he could give me information?" "Well, because he fought here." "Let's go to him, then." And I walked quickly toward the officer. One of my soldiers stopped me. "Pardon," he said, "but you see—" "Why do you stop me?" "Are you sure you want to know what he has to say?" the soldier asked. "At all costs. No matter what he tells you? No matter what. Then I'll call him over." He stepped forward. "Captain Bitteron?" The officer paused, peering toward him through the darkness. "Who calls?" he asked. "We'd like to speak with you, mon officier." "Who is that?" "A lady. A lady. On the battlefield at this hour. Why not, monsieur, if that lady comes to the battlefield seeking one she loves, to treat him if he's wounded, or bury him if he's dead?" The officer approached. He was a man of about 30. Seeing me, he removed his hat, to reveal a noble and distinguished face framed by blonde hair. "Whom do you seek, madame?" he asked me. "Antoine de Bourbon, the Comte de Morey," I replied. The officer looked at me more closely. Then, paling slightly, voice altered, he repeated, "The Comte de Morey. You seek the Comte de Morey?" "Yes, the Comte de Morey. These good men tell me that you, better than anyone, should be able to tell me what happened to him." He looked at my soldiers, grimaced and frowned. "Mon capitaine," one of them said, "it seems this lady is his fiancée, and she wants to know what's become of him." "Monsieur, in heaven's name," I cried, "you saw the Comte de Morey. You know something about him. Tell me what you know." "Madame, here's what I know. I was sent with my company of fusiliers to hide in ambush there in the ravine. We fired a volley, then pulled back to draw the enemy in. The Comte de Morey, who never refused a fight, and was quick to show his courage, charged recklessly at us, and fired his pistolet. Well, madame, I won't lie. At me. His bullet cut the feather from my hat. I shot back, but more accurately, I'm sorry to say. I uttered a cry of terror. "It was you?" I said, drawing back. "Madame," the captain said, "it was a fair fight. I thought I was dealing with just another officer of the Marshal Duke's army. If I'd known that he who charged me was a prince, and moreover the son of Henri IV, I'd certainly have forfeited my own life before taking his. But it was only when I heard him shout, 'To me, for the Bourbons!' that I realized what a catastrophe I'd caused." "Oh, yes," I cried, "a terrible catastrophe. But tell me, was he killed?" "I don't know, madame." Just then their musketeers opened fire. My fusiliers replied in good order. We withdrew, and I saw them standing over the body of the Count, bloody and hatless. "Oh, his hat! It's here." I crushed it passionately to my lips. "Madame," the captain said with genuine pain, "give me your orders. After causing such a calamity, how can I won't say atone, but at least help you in your search. Tell me, and I'll do everything in my power to help." "Thank you, monsieur," I said, trying to get hold of myself. "But the only thing you can do is tell me in which direction the Count was carried away." "Toward Fonday, madame," he replied. "But for safety's sake, follow the path that starts 100 paces to your right. After a mile, you'll come to a house where they should know something." "Very well," I said, and then to the gardener, "You understand, don't you?" "Yes, madame. Let's go." "I could offer the lady my horse," the officer said timidly. "Thank you, monsieur," I replied. "I asked you for all I needed, and you gave me all I asked." I passed a handful of crowns to my 3 soldiers. 2 went off, but the 3rd insisted on escorting me to the house of which we'd been told. However, I couldn't resist the desire to take one last look at the ground consecrated by your blood. I turned and saw the captain standing where I'd left him, staring at me like a man stunned by misfortune. On the way to the house, We found corpses all along the path, but I was used to them by then, and walked with a firm step through blood-stained grass that rose to my knees. We reached the house, which was overflowing with wounded from both sides, some lying outside on the ground strewn with straw. I came into this asylum of pain, to question the dying with my voice, and the dead with my eyes. At my questions, one dying man raised himself on his elbow. "The Comte de Morey," he said. "I saw him go past in the carriage of Monsieur." "Dead or wounded?" I asked. "Wounded," said the dying man. "But he was like me, more dead than alive." "My God!" I cried. Where were they taking him? I don't know, but I did hear them mention a name as the carriage turned at the crossroad. "Whose? That of Madame de Ventadour." "Yes, that makes sense. Madame de Ventadour is nearby, at the Abbey of Pouilly. That's it. Thank you, my friend." And leaving a few crowns beside him, I went out and told the gardener, "He's at the Abbey of Pouilly." Pouilly Abbey was about 2 miles from there. The gardener's horse was exhausted, and I'd left mine in the meadow of the battlefield. It was impossible to find a carriage, or even a farmer's cart, and to search for one would have wasted valuable time. I felt no fatigue, so we set out on foot. We'd gone barely a mile when the threatened storm finally broke and it began to rain. But all I could think of was you. I didn't feel the rain. I couldn't hear the storm. I marched through torrents of water on a path intermittently lit as bright as day. We came to a large oak. The gardener begged me to shelter there a while and wait until the storm had passed, but I shook my head and continued on my way without answering. A minute later, lightning struck the oak and shattered it to splinters. I paused long enough to point out what had happened. "Yes, madame," the gardener said, "you're protected from the sky, so, for as long as God gives you strength. Let's go on." We went on for another hour or so, until the lightning showed us the abbey where we were bound. I doubled our pace, and soon after we arrived. In the abbey, all were asleep, or pretending to sleep. I made enough noise to awaken them from the deepest slumber. Gatekeeper, sisters, and the abbess herself. After 1,000 precautions, they finally opened up. They'd clearly heard me knocking, but seemed to fear the assault of some rapacious horde. I hastened to identify myself, and immediately asked for news of you. The sister gatekeeper knew who I meant, but claimed not to have seen you, or even to know you'd been wounded. I asked to speak to Madame de Ventadour, and they took me to her. I found her in full habit. Having heard the noise I'd made, she'd arisen and dressed. I thought she looked pale, and seemed to tremble. She dismissed this as signs of the fear she'd felt when she heard me knocking, afraid it was rogue soldiers at the gate. I reassured her, and told her I'd come from Saint-Pont, how I'd gone to the battlefield and found the place where you'd fallen. I showed her your hat, still clenched in my hand. I told her what I'd learned from the dying soldier, and begged her, in the name of heaven, to tell me what she knew about you. She replied that he must have been mistaken, or that the coach, after turning on the path to the abbey, must have gone another way, either right or left, and taken another route. In any event, she hadn't seen you, and had no news of you. I dropped my pleading hands and slumped onto a nearby settee. My strength had left me, along with my hope. The abbess summoned her women, who stripped me of my soaking clothes, still stuck to me from the drenching rain. I'd lost my shoes somewhere in the muddy road, and had walked at least a mile in bare feet. They brought a bath and placed me into it, where I lapsed into a stupor, almost unconscious. As I slowly came around, I heard them talking about someone having seen a carriage take the road to Mazères. I questioned them. The information came from a peasant who had brought the convent their evening milk. The abbess offered me her own carriage and horses, if I wanted to continue my search. I accepted. They brought me my clothes, for, seeing the first light of day streaming in, I didn't want to lose a moment before taking up the trail. It was quite possible they'd taken you to Mazères, as Mazères was a chateau that had stood on the side of Montmorency. Madame de Ventadour lent me her personal driver, and we departed. At Villeneuve-le-Comtat, at Peyre, at Sainte-Gamette, we sought information. But not only had nobody seen anything, but in those villages they didn't even know the Battle of Castelnaudary had taken place. We continued on the road to Mazères. There, somebody would have to know something. The gates would be guarded by sentries loyal to Monsieur de Montmorency, who would have no reason to conceal the presence of the Comte de Moret. We arrived at the gates. They hadn't seen a carriage, didn't know the Comte de Moret was wounded, and their first news of the Battle of Castelnaudary came from us. We soon had proof that this was the truth, as an officer galloped up at full speed, announcing that Monsieur de Montmorency was a prisoner, Monsieur de Rieux was dead, all was lost, and it was every man for himself. After that, everyone was too busy to answer more questions. I had completely lost track of you. We began to search at random, casting around the theatre of events in a great circle, as hunters do when tracking game. We visited Belpech, Cauzac, Fangeau, Alzon, Conques, Berriac. In none of these places was there any hint of your passage. Somewhere between Fondeilly and the Abbey, your carriage had disappeared like a mirage. At Berriac, I found the steward of our house in Valence. My father had sent word that he would spend 2 or 3 months at our chateau there. They implored me to come home, and that put an end to my search. After 3 weeks of looking, I'd lost all hope of finding you. I went to the chateau. My father arrived the next day. He found me despondent. After a word from the steward, everyone in the chateau was very considerate, and no one mentioned my journey. My father came and sat by my bedside. He was a very serious, even severe man, as you know. I'd told him of my love for you, and your promise to be my husband. The honour of such an alliance was so great that he'd given up his favourite project, that of my marriage to the Vicomte de Ponty, the son of his oldest friend. But with your death, that project once again was his foremost desire. Besides, Louis XIII had had words with him about his daughter's love for a rebel. As you were his brother, the king was particularly angry with you. Your property and domains were all confiscated, and if you hadn't been presumed dead, you would have been tried and treated just as Montmorency had been, king's son though you were. So it was a blessing that you were dead, and had died on the battlefield. That captain I'd seen and interrogated, that killer whom I'd cursed, and whose pale face haunted me in my dreams, that murderer had saved you from the scaffold. I listened, sadly and sombrely, to my father. His mind was made up. The Comte de Ponty, who had fought in the army of Marshal Schomberg, was in the royal favour. It was my father and him against me and the cardinal. On my side, I did what I could. I asked my father for 3 months. If, after that time, I'd had no news of you, or your death was confirmed, I would go to the church with the Vicomte de Ponty. On October 30th, Monsieur de Montmorency was executed. Then I almost blessed your murderer, for I knew that if you'd had to suffer like the poor Duke, it would have killed me. There was no doubt about your fate. Everyone said you'd been killed. I was a widow who'd never been married. 3 months passed. On the last day of the 3rd month, my father came to the chateau with the Vicomte de Ponty. I knew how punctual my father was, and didn't want to keep him waiting. When he arrived, he found me already in my bridal gown. The clock struck 11. The priest awaited us at the church. I rose and rested my arm on my father's. The Comte de Ponty walked behind with his son. They were followed by 5 or 6 mutual friends, a few dozen relatives, and the servants. We made our way toward the church. My father didn't speak, only looked at me. He seemed surprised to find me so quiet. Like a martyr marching to her death, my face lit up as I approached the place of execution. As we entered the church, I was pale but smiling, like a castaway fighting a storm who sees the safety of port. The priest was waiting at the altar. We approached, and all went down on their knees. I'd been afraid that when I arrived at this point, my strength would fail me, but I was still strong, and I thanked the Lord for it with all my heart. The priest asked the Vicomte de Ponty if he took me for his wife. Yes, he replied. He gave me the same question, asking if I took Monsieur de Ponty as my husband. My husband in this world and the next, I replied, is my divine Saviour Jesus, and I shall never have another. I made this response in a tone so calm and firm that no one in the church missed a word. Monsieur de Ponty looked at me with a frightened air, as if I'd gone mad. My father took a step forward, but I passed through the gate that separated me from the altar, raised my arms to heaven and cried in a loud voice, "From this moment I belong to God, and only God has a right to claim me." "Isabel," my father shouted, "would you defy my authority?" "There is an authority higher and holier than yours, my father," I replied respectfully. "It's the authority of the one who sustained my faith while on the road to misfortune. Father, I am no longer of this earthly world. Pray for me, as I will pray for all of you." My father moved to pass the gate and snatch me from the altar, but the priest held his arms out to block him. "Woe," said he, "woe to he who would impede this call to vocation or try to prevent it. This girl has given herself to God, and I receive her in his name. The house of God is a holy sanctuary where no one, not even her father, has a right to take her against her will." My father might not have been stopped by this warning, but the Comte de Ponty dragged him away. The Viscount and the rest of the entourage followed the old man out, and the door closed behind them. The priest asked me where I wished to retire. I had myself driven to the Ursuline convent. My father went to Paris at once, to appeal to the cardinal, but all he got from the cardinal was an order that I was not to take my vows for the term of a year. That year passed. After a year and a day, I took the veil. That was 4 years ago. For 4 years, not a day has passed without my praying for you, kissing the feathers of the hat I'd picked up on the battlefield at Castelnaudary, the only relic of you I had. Now you know everything, and now, in your turn, tell me all in detail. Tell me by what miracle you live. Tell me where you are. Tell me how I can see you, and tell it all quickly before I go mad. 17th of May, 4 in the morning.
17. 6 in the morning, immediately after your letter. For a moment, God turned his eyes away from us, and in that moment, the angel of evil passed over us and touched our heads. Listen, in your turn. You know what pledges I'd made to my brother Gaston. I'd hoped that by making good on one, I'd account for them all. The king's prime minister seemed to think only of the king, not of the rest of us. Such tyranny was intolerable to the sons of France. Every time the cardinal employed the king's name and used his seal without consulting him was a mark against his minister. Daily he gave orders in the house of Henri IV without regard for his sons, including the one who was on the throne. And meanwhile, as he gathered a fortune of 200 million, barely a third of France's people could get decent bread. Another third lived on coarse oat bread, while the final third, like filthy farmyard animals, sustained themselves on acorns and mash. Across the realm he'd been granted control of numerous royal fortresses and domains. He had Brouage, Orléans, Ré, La Rochelle, Saumur, Angers, Brest, Amboise, Le Havre, Pont de l'Arche, and Pontoise at the very gates of Paris. He was master of the province and citadel of Verdun. In addition to the garrisons of all these towns, forts, and citadels, he was admiral of the navy. He had his own personal company of guards. He held in his hands all the keys to France. The rest of France, gathered against him, wasn't enough to raise an army to oppose his own. The prisons had become graves to bury the true servants of the king, and the crime of lèse-majesté no longer applied to those who rebelled against the king or the state, but to anyone who lacked the zeal and blind obedience to follow the will and purpose of his prime minister. I had to say all this, first and foremost, because it's my excuse for leaving you and taking the side of one who, later, would deny us all, alive or dead. It was the trial and execution of the old Maréchal de Marillac that decided everything for me. I had been in correspondence with my brother Gaston and with Queen Marie de Medici, who had always been perfectly friendly to me. I determined to join my fortune to theirs. Do you remember how melancholy I was at that time? Do you remember my emotion, my voice breaking into sobs when I told you that my future was less certain than that of the new leaves on the tree under which we sat? Do you remember how I asked you for 3 more months before making you my wife, while saying that my happiest day would be the day I became your husband? In fact, from that moment, I was privy to all the affairs of my brother Gaston, and acted as intermediary between him and poor Montmorency. You ask me not to leave out any details, and I won't forget or omit anything, if only to justify myself to you and to me. We had to have the Spanish and Neapolitans on our side, and in fact, when Montmorency declared for us, the Neapolitans did indeed appear off the coast of Narbonne, but they didn't dare to land. As for the Spaniards, they mustered at Urgel on their side of the border, but never crossed to ours. You saw the insurrection rise all around you. You heard the cries of revolt in Bagnols, in Lunel, in Beaucaire, and in Alais. One morning I received, with a heavy heart, because I knew it betokened our separation, one morning there came the manifesto in which my brother Gaston declared himself Lieutenant General of France. Shortly thereafter, as you learned in a letter from the king to your father, ordering him to Paris, Gaston returned to France with 1,800 horse, who burned the outlying suburb of Saint-Nicolas and the houses of the members of Parliament, who tried and condemned Marillac. A day later, in my turn, I too received a letter. My brother wrote to me from Albi, and summoned me to keep my oath to him. That was the day I took leave of you, August 14th, 1632, a fatal date, burned as deeply into my heart as yours. Oh, all your details of my departure are true. Your depiction of that night is perfect, except I could see you for longer than you could see me. You were on the balcony of your room, lit from behind, while I plunged into deepening darkness. But eventually the road reached a turn, beyond which I'd see you no more. At that point I halted my horse, wondering if it wouldn't be better to forget all my oaths and commitments, sacrificing honour to love to return to you. But your window closed, your light went out, and I thought it a warning from God to continue on my path. So I dug my spurs into my horse, wrapped my head in my cloak, and rushed forward into the darkness drowning the horizon, while urging myself, forward, forward. 2 days later I was in Albi, where I nearly caught up to my brother, who'd left 500 Polish horse as my command, and marched on to Béziers. On August 29th, I received orders from the Marshal Duke to join him. I went with my 500, and reached him on the night of August 30th. On the 31st, we met to consider our position. We believed Monsieur de Schomberg was marching on Castelnaudary, and marched there in our turn. But Schomberg got there first and occupied a house only 10 minutes from the field, where he formed up a corps of guards. It was then September 1st, at 8 in the morning. The Marshal Duke was apprised of the situation. He took 500 men to scout Schomberg's army in force, and when he reached the house, he charged it. Those within soon abandoned their posts. Monsieur de Montmorency left 150 men to guard the house, and returned to us quite pleased with this initial success. He found us gathered in the largest house in town, my brother Gaston, Monsieur de Rieux, Monsieur de Chaudebon, and me. Approaching my brother, Montmorency announced, "Monsieur, today you will triumph over all your enemies. Today the son will be reunited with his mother. But," he added, gesturing with his bloody sword, "only if by tonight your sword is like mine, that is to say, red to the hilt." My brother doesn't care for swords, especially when they're bloody, and he turned away. "Hey, Marshal," he said, "do you never tire of boasting? Always you promise me great victories, but these hopes are never fulfilled." "In any case," said the Marshal, "assuming you're still with me, and I, as you say, have given you hope, today that's more than anyone's done for your brother the King, for there's not just hope at stake here, there's life itself." "Why, Marshal," Gaston said with a shrug, "do you really suppose the life of the heir apparent is in play? No matter what happens, I'm sure to make my peace, as I did the last 3 times. The Marshal smiled sourly and, turning from the Prince, approached the rest of us. "Well, now we come to the bout," he said, "and our man already has a nosebleed. He says he, at least, will get away clean. But I think if he does, neither I, nor you, Monsieur de Moray, nor you, Monsieur de Rieux, will be part of his escort." We said we certainly would not. "Very well," the Marshal Duke continued, "then come with me, because we swore that when this day came we'd meet it sword in hand." Just then, the report came that Schomberg's army had left the woods and was marching toward us. "Come, gentlemen," the Marshal Duke said, "the time has come. Every man to his post." We had to pass over a river on a small bridge, where they might have disputed our crossing, But no one did. On the contrary, Monsieur de Schomberg's plan was to draw us forward into an ambush on that sunken road where you found my poor squire. The bridge crossed, I took my position on the left wing, which was under my command. It was, as you know, my first battle. I was eager to show that, though of the same blood as Monsieur, my blood ran hotter than his. Ahead, I saw a troop of fusiliers detached as forward skirmishers. I charged them. I particularly noted the officer you met on the night after the battle. He was a brave gentleman, as calm under fire as if he were on parade. I spurred straight at him and discharged my pistol, which, as you said, trimmed the feather from his hat. He returned fire. I felt a blow to my left side. I put my hand to it without knowing what I'd find, and drew it away covered with blood. I didn't feel much pain at the time, but something like a red cloud passed before my eyes, and the earth spun beneath me. My horse shied, a movement I didn't have enough strength to control. I felt myself slipping from the saddle. I cried, "To me, for the Bourbons!" and I saw a vision of you. As my eyes closed, I seemed to hear a volley of musketry, and a curtain of flame unrolled before me. Doubtless my poles bore me away, because from that moment until I recovered my senses, a mile or two from there, I was unaware of what happened to me. I was in terrible pain when I came to. I opened my eyes to see a curious crowd peering in from around the carriage. I tried to figure out where they were taking me. I remembered the sister of my friend Monsieur de Ventadour was the abbess of a nearby convent. With an effort, I put my head out the door, and gave orders to take me to Madame de Ventadour. You see, your dedicated pursuit put you on the right trail, and it isn't your fault you didn't catch up with me. The pain that had awakened me then plunged me back into unconsciousness. I don't know quite how I was brought before Madame de Ventadour, but when I awoke, I found myself lying on an excellent bed. However, I was in some sort of underground vault. The doctor of the convent was near at hand, but someone beside me, seeing my eyes open, whispered to me, "Don't say who you are." You'd been my final memory, and you were my first thought. I looked for you, but you weren't there. I saw only unknown faces, and a man with rolled-up sleeves and bloody hands. It was the doctor who'd tended to me. I closed my eyes. Later that night you came to the abbey, but, due to their fear of the cardinal, they told you they hadn't seen me, so you didn't know I was there, and I didn't know you'd come. We came so close, but missed each other. I have little sense of what happened during the 2 weeks after I was wounded. It was less a recovery than a pause at the door of the tomb. Finally, my youth and strength of will prevailed. I felt life return to my feverish and languid limbs, and from that moment the doctor declared I had turned the corner. But I was forbidden to leave my bed or be taken outdoors. I was still at risk of my life for another 4 to 6 weeks. It was during this time that they tried and executed the Marshal Duke. That execution only reinforced the terror of the poor sisters who were tending me. They had no doubt that even a prince of the blood would be treated like Monsieur de Montmorency. For hadn't Montmorency allied with the traitorous Marie de Medici? Outside, everyone decided I must be dead, and as it was in everyone's interest to believe it, the news of my death soon spread. After 2 months, I could get up. Though I'd remained hidden in the vaults beneath the convent until then, now my recovery required fresh air. It was November, but Languedoc's mild winter didn't prevent night-time walks. I was allowed to take the night air in the convent garden. Along with thought and feeling, though not yet strength, because I was so feeble, I couldn't go up or down stairs. My love for you, numbed till then by the nearness of death, returned with full force. I spoke only of you, longed only for you. As soon as I could hold a pen, I asked to be able to write to you. They gave me what I asked for, and a messenger took my letter away. But as a message would reveal that I still lived, and as Madame de Ventadour was terrified that such news would result in their persecution, imprisonment, perhaps even death, the messenger just stayed in the area for 2 weeks, then returned to say that your father had taken you to Paris, and he'd delivered my letter to those of your women who seemed most devoted to you. That reassured me. I was certain my appeal to your love would bring a prompt reply. A month passed. Every day that went by was another blow to my confidence, a wound to my hope. It was 3 months since the Battle of Castelnaudary. I ached to know the current news. Wounded at the outset of the fight, I knew nothing of the result. They hesitated to tell me the news until I threatened to go find out for myself. Finally, they told me everything: the loss of the battle, Gaston's flight and reconciliation, his fourth, as he'd said, the trial and death of Montmorency, the confiscation of my property, the loss of my rank and my dignity. I took this news better than they expected. Certainly the death of the poor Marshal was a heavy blow. But after the execution of Monsieur de Marillac, we'd foreseen that death was a possibility for both Monsieur de Montmorency and myself, and had discussed it more than once. As for the loss of my rank, my dignity, and my fortune, I met that with a contemptuous smile. Men had taken from me everything that could be given by men, but they'd left me with what God had given me: your love. From that moment, your love for me was the one hope I had left in life. It was the only star shining in the sky of the future, which had become as dark as that of the past had been radiant. The messenger hadn't found you, so I resolved to be my own messenger. Your response had never come, so I decided to seek an answer for myself. But leaving the convent wasn't going to be easy. They kept a close watch on me, afraid I might be seen and recognized. I therefore told them I proposed to leave, not just the convent, but France itself. For the abbess, this was the best proposal I could possibly make. It was agreed that I would disguise myself as a fisherman and travel among others as far as Narbonne, where I would leave them. At Narbonne Abbey, I would dress in ecclesiastical garb and continue in the abbess's carriage. I'd never been to that area, and besides, everyone thought I was dead, so it was unlikely that I'd be recognized. The good abbess put her coffers at my disposal. I thanked her, but when wounded I'd had on me 200 crowns or so, which was still in my purse, plus diamond rings and brooches worth 10,000 crowns at least. And you were rich, so what use had I for money? I left the abbey in early January, full of gratitude for the hospitality they'd given me. Alas, I had no idea how dearly that hospitality had cost me. It was 28 leagues to Narbonne, and I was still so weak that I could walk for only short distances, though perhaps I exaggerated my weakness a bit, so they'd underestimate me. The first night we lodged in Villepinte, the second in Barbara, the third in Narbonne. The next day they made arrangements to sail me to Marseille. I was to be a sick prelate with ailing lungs, ordered to take the air at Hyères or Nice. I rested for a day at Narbonne and departed the next. With a good wind behind me, 48 hours later I was in Marseille. There I paid my boatmen, said farewell to the 2 servants of the abbess who'd come with me, and was once again perfectly free. In the market I hired a coach to take me to Avignon, and from Avignon up the Rhone to Valence. My cavalier airs might betray me, so I made myself an officer's uniform of the Cardinal's Guard. Wearing that uniform, I was sure I wouldn't be bothered. I left Marseille and reached Avignon in 3 days. In Avignon, the wind was blowing up from the sea, ensuring good navigation, so I entrusted myself to the Rhone. When the wind died, we roped the boat to horses and were drawn along by a cable. Early one day I saw your chateau in the distance. It was there that you would be waiting for me, or, if what I'd been told was true and your father had taken you to Paris, it was there that I'd find news of you. I wanted to be put ashore. The boat got on so slowly, but unfortunately I was still too weak. Oh, if only I'd arrived just 1 hour sooner. If only I'd seen you first. But it was not to be. We were doomed. I could only stand in the prow and await our arrival. Even so, half a league short of Valence, I disembarked. I could walk only slowly, but that was faster than the boat. Moreover, the hope of seeing you revived my strength. From far off I saw your balcony, the one from which you'd waved goodbye as I turned the corner of the road. But the balcony was empty, and the blinds were shut. There was something about the chateau which I'd yearned to see for so long, something bleak and empty that chilled me. Suddenly I saw the main gate open. A procession marched out, turned toward the city, and disappeared. I was still a quarter league away, but without knowing why, I felt my heart sink and my strength fail me. I leaned against a tree beside the road, sweat beading my forehead. I wiped it away and resumed my trek. I came upon a servant.
My friend,
I asked, hesitating, does Mademoiselle Isabelle de Lautrec still live in that chateau?
That's right, mon officier, he said.
Mademoiselle Isabelle de Lautrec. But half an hour from now she'll be called something else.
Something else?
What will she be called? Madame la Vicomtesse de Ponty.
Why the Vicomtesse de Ponty?
Because in half an hour she'll be the wife of my master, the Vicomte de Ponty. I let myself go pale and mopped my face with my handkerchief.
So, I said, the procession I saw leaving the chateau, was that of the betrothed? And at this moment, they're in the church. No, it's impossible.
Impossible, said the servant. Well, if you want to see it with your own eyes, officer, there's still time. Take this shortcut and you'll be at the church soon enough. I couldn't believe the man's story. I wanted him to be wrong. I wanted to see with my own eyes that there was no such terrible reality. For some reason he must be telling me a lie, a bald-faced lie. I knew Valence, having lived there for 3 months. I quickly crossed the bridge, entered the town, and followed the streets that would take me most directly to the church. Besides, I was guided by the jubilant sound of the bells. The cathedral square was crowded with people. Despite the pealing bells, despite the crowd of celebrants, I still couldn't believe. I told myself the man had misled me, that someone else was walking to the altar. But though I passed through a teeming crowd, I didn't dare to ask anyone. If I hadn't been dressed as one of the cardinal's guard, I certainly couldn't have pushed through to the front ranks, but the crowd parted at the sight of my uniform. And then, it takes all my strength to recount these terrible details. Until yesterday I didn't know for sure it was you who was writing to me. I hadn't yet reopened this lethal wound. You suffered through my death, but I suffered through your betrayal.
Your betrayal. Forgive me, Isabelle, forgive me.
I know now it was only the appearance, but for me, unhappy wretch, it was reality. When I saw you, a cloud rose before my eyes like the one when I was shot from my horse by that officer. It was the same feeling, but more painful, because while the bullet struck my side, this pierced my heart. I saw you appear. You were pale, but almost smiling. You walked with a firm stride across the square, seemingly in a hurry to get to the church. I passed a hand over my eyes, stumbled, panting, muttering in a low voice that surprised those around me. My God, this can't be true. My God, my eyes, my ears, all my senses must be deceiving me. But she's alone. Alone. She couldn't wrong me so. You passed no more than 10 feet from me, but I was struck dumb, hoping you wouldn't enter the church, that you would turn away. You would cry out that this was a violation of your love, and then I would rush forward. And though it cost me my life, I'd cry, yes, I love her. Yes, she loves me. Yes, I am the Comte de Morey, dead to everyone but her, Isabelle de Lautrec, my bride in this world and the next. Let me be with my fiancé. And I would have carried you away in the face of all of them, despite everything, because I felt I had the strength of a giant. But Isabelle, Isabelle, you didn't speak. You didn't stop. You went on into the church. A long cry, a heartbreaking wail rose from the depths of my breast as you disappeared through the doors, and then, before anyone could ask me why I moaned so, I turned, darted through the crowd and disappeared. I returned to the riverbank. I found my boat. I threw myself amidst the boatmen, burying my hands in my hair and crying, Isabelle! Isabelle! They left me a while in my despair. Then they asked me where I wanted to go. I pointed downriver. They loosed the boat, and the Rhone carried us away. What more can I say? I must have survived the next 4 years, since today you find me still alive and still in love. But before today, I didn't exist. I've been waiting to take my vows until the end of the term I'd imposed on myself. That term you have brought to an end. Thank you.
Since I know you didn't betray me, since I know you still love me, entering my vocation will be easier for me, and now I can go calmly to God. Pray for your brother, as your brother prays for you. 3:00 in the afternoon. 18. 5:30, the same day. What's this you tell me? I don't quite understand. You have found me. You're sure I didn't betray you. You know I love you. And this, you say, ends the term of waiting to take your vows? Makes your vocation easier? Makes you calm enough to consecrate yourself to God? Good Lord, would you continue with your strange project of renouncing the world? Just listen to me. God is not unjust. When I dedicated myself to him, it was in the belief that you were dead. But you live. God won't require me to keep a vow made in despair if the cause of my despair doesn't exist. I'm free, despite my vows. Yes, it's as you say. We nearly touched each other at the Abbey, but had no way of knowing we were so close to each other. Oh, but I'm wrong. I belie my own heart, for an inner voice cried to me, "Stand firm, argue, insist. He is here." Yes, I understand the poor abbess was terrified, afraid of what the hospitality she gave you would cost. Oh, why couldn't I have found you? I'd been proud of the mission God had given me to save the son of Henri IV. I wanted the pride and glory to be able to say, when the whole world abandoned him, I alone endured, I alone rescued him. Fool that I am! Saying that would have betrayed you, and you'd have been lost like the Marshal Duke. Better then for her to hide you from me, so you should live. Better that I should suffer, should despair, should die. But why despair now? Why should I die? You've yet to take your vows, and I regard mine as invalid. Let's leave. Let's go to Italy, to Spain, to the end of the world. I'm still rich. And besides, why do we need money? We love each other. Come, let's go. Oh, answer me. Yes, tell me where you are. Tell me how to find you. Consider this. You doubted me, your Isabel. You thought me deceitful, and you owe me expiation. I wait. 19. 5 in the morning. Your letter stirs the most secret depths of my heart. Ah, for what was to have been ours! You offer me the happiness I sought, expected, desired all my life, and I cannot accept that happiness. Isabel, you are a lady as I am a gentleman. Neither of us would betray a promise made to men, let alone an oath made to God. Don't try to deceive yourself. The vows you made are real, and God doesn't admit of equivocation. For us there is only one future, the one to which misfortune has led us. You showed me the sacred path, and you were the first to take it. I follow you, and we shall arrive together, since we have the same goal. I will pray for you as you pray for me. We pray as one, not for ourselves, but for the eternal life and eternal love that we shall receive from the Lord, in place of worldly love and mortal life. And don't believe that, because I tell you this, I love you less than you love me. No, I can't love you less. I know. I love you with the heart of a man much stronger since he fell from his heights to the depths, and who, having touched death with his hand, returns pale from the tomb, bearing revelations of another life beyond. Believe me, Isabel, the more I love you, the more certain I am on this point. Don't risk your eternal salvation on such sophistry. The life of this world is to eternity as a second is to a century. We live for a second on the earth, but we live forever with God. And then, moreover, listen to this, my bride in this world and the next. Though it was God who willed despair into your heart when it was deceived, that power to bind has the power to unbind. Urban VIII is Pope, and your family has powerful allies in Italy. Use them to get a nullification of your vows. On that day, Isabel, you truly can tell me I am free. And then, oh, I dare not think of what blessed happiness, what bliss without remorse we would find.
20.
2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes, you are right. There must be no shadow on our happiness. In our hearts shall be neither fear nor remorse, and our dark and stormy sky shall be followed by a firmament glittering with stars. Yes, I spoke to one who has listened to me. Yes, she assures me she'll find mercy for me. Yes, I ask you for 3 months to go free myself, and if, in 3 months, our dove hasn't borne you the ecclesiastical order that liberates me, then our only hope is in heaven. Then you may give yourself to God as I did, bound by an unbreakable oath. Oh, I couldn't bear to know that you were free when I am forever chained. Tomorrow I'll be on my way.
21. 4:30 in the afternoon. Go, and may God be with you. June 1st, 1638. It's just a month since I received your last letter. A month I spent watching for the coming of our dove. A month with no words about you, except those from my heart. How the time passes. Now minutes become hours, hours become days, days become years. Can I live like this for 2 more months? Yes, because I will hold out hope until the very last day. I write this letter without knowing if you'll ever receive it, but I write for that day that shall separate us or bring us together. For you know, Isabel, I think about you with every beat of my heart. 22.
June 22nd, 1638. Fly, beloved dove, fly to my dear returned one. Tell him it was his prayers that protected me. Tell him I'm free. Tell him we are happy. Free, free, free. Let me tell you, my beloved, I don't know where to start. I'm so mad with joy. As you may know, the same day I wrote my last letter to you, the good news came, officially confirmed, that the Queen was pregnant. To celebrate the occasion, there were to be great festivals throughout France, and pardons granted by the King and Cardinal. I resolved to go and throw myself at the feet of the Cardinal, who has, in ecclesiastical matters, all the powers of Rome. That's why I asked you for only 3 months. The same day I wrote you, I departed with the permission of our Mother Superior. My neighbour in the next cell agreed to take care of our dove. I was so sure of myself. I left her without fear. I departed, but despite my best efforts, I couldn't get to Paris in less than 17 days. The Cardinal was at his country estate in Rueil. I left for there immediately. At first he was ill and couldn't receive me. I took lodgings in the town and waited, after leaving my name with Father Joseph. On the 3rd day, Father Joseph himself came to tell me that His Eminence was ready to receive me. I rose at this news, but fell back in my chair, pale as death. My heart quivered, and my legs were too weak to hold me. They say Father Joseph isn't tender of heart, and yet, when he saw me collapse at the mere idea of an audience with the Cardinal, he did his best to encourage me, telling me that if I had something to ask of His Eminence, the time was right, as the Cardinal was better than he'd been for quite some time. Oh, my entire life and yours depended on what was to happen between that man and me. I followed Father Joseph, blind to my surroundings, my eyes fixed only on him and matching my pace to his, as if his movements directed mine. We passed through the town and entered the estate. We went up an avenue of tall trees. I saw everything at once, all blurred together, so the details escaped me. Finally, I saw before us an arbour of honeysuckle and clematis, and under it a man half lying on a couch. He was dressed in a white robe and wearing a red cap, the biretta of a cardinal. I pointed toward the man, and Father Joseph understood. "Yes," he said, "that's him." Just then I was passing a large tree. I paused and leaned against it, for I felt that if I took another step without support, I'd fall. The Cardinal saw my hesitation, the stagger that betrayed my weakness. He rose. "Approach without fear," he said. An indescribable tone softened his usually gruff voice, and it was that change in his voice that suddenly filled me with hope. I regained my strength and, almost running, I threw myself at his feet. He waved Father Joseph away, who obeyed, retreating out of earshot but still within view. I bowed and extended my hands before me. "What do you want of me, my daughter?" asked the Cardinal Duke. Monseigneur, Monseigneur, a blessing upon which depends not just my life, but my salvation. Your name? Isabelle de Lautrec. Ah, your father was a loyal servant of the king. A rare thing in this time of rebellion. We had the misfortune to lose him. Yes, Monseigneur, it is permitted to invoke his memory in your presence. Were he alive, I would grant him whatever he asked, except for those things that are in the purview of the Lord, for whom I am but a simple vicar. Speak. What do you wish? Monseigneur, I have taken vows. So I recall, because at your father's request, I opposed these vows with all my power, and instead of granting your wish to take them, asked you to delay for a full year. So you took these vows despite the year's delay? Alas, Monseigneur, I did. I admired the prodigious memory of this great man of affairs, who recalled so unimportant an event as a poor child he'd never seen taking the veil. Ah, and now you repent them. I prefer to blame my repentance on inconstancy rather than desire. Monseigneur, I said, I was just 18 years old, and the death of a man I loved had driven me mad. He smiled. I see. And now that you are 24, you've become more reasonable. I waited, hands clasped. So now, he said, you would break those vows as, with time, the woman has overcome the Holy Sister. The memories of the world have pursued you in your seclusion, and though you swore your body to God, your soul, I perceive, remains on earth. Oh, human weakness! Monseigneur, Monseigneur, I cried, I'm lost unless you have mercy on me. It was, however, freely and voluntarily that you took your vows. Yes, freely and voluntarily. I repeat, Monseigneur, I was mad. And what excuse can you give God for this failure to keep your oath? My excuse, an excuse already well known to God, who had preserved your life, my beloved, that I couldn't tell him, or all would be lost. I remained silent, but for a tiny moan. So, you have no excuse, said the Duke. I wrung my hands in agony. Well then, I must find one for you, he said, however mundane. Oh, help me, Monseigneur, aid me, and I'll bless you till the last breath of my life. As minister to King Louis XIII, I don't wish a name as loyal and good as yours to perish. Your house is one of the true glories of France, and the true glories of France are dear to me. Then, gazing at me, he asked, You love someone? I bowed my head into the dust. Yes, that's it, the Duke continued. I guessed as much. You love someone, and the one you love is free? Yes, Monseigneur. He knows of your request and expects it. He is waiting. Very well. You shall be free, and this man shall join his name, whatever it is, to that of Lautrec, so that the name of the victor of Ravenna and Brescia shall not perish. Oh, Monseigneur, I cried, kissing his feet. He lifted me, breathless with joy, and beckoned to Father Joseph, who approached. Escort Mademoiselle Isabelle de Lautrec back where you found her, the cardinal said, and in an hour you can bring her the order that releases her from her vows. Monseigneur, Monseigneur, how can I thank you? That's easy enough. When you're asked your opinion of me, say that I know both how to punish and how to reward. Living, I punish the traitor Montmorency. Dead, I reward the loyal Lautrec. Go, my daughter, go. I kissed his hands 10 times over, and then followed Father Joseph. An hour later, he brought me the order that nullified my vows. I left at once, without losing a minute, the precious order next to my heart, which was even more devoted to God since God had released me from my words. My return trip took only 13 days, and here I am, writing to you, beloved, not telling all I have to say, because that would take a book, and it would be a week before you knew that I'm free. I love you, and we shall be happy. I hasten to finish, because I don't want to delay this wonderful news a single minute. I'm keeping the horses harnessed. At the return of the dove, I'm ready to go. Just tell me where you are, and wait there for me. Go, my dove. I've never had such need for your wings, and then return. Do you hear, my beloved? Tell me nothing but where I need to go to find you. I don't want to delay our reunion by even so long as it takes to write, I love you. 10 minutes later. Oh, woe, woe is upon us. That man is fatal to us, beloved, perhaps even more so the second time than the first. Listen, listen, although you can't hear me. Listen, although you may never know what I must tell you. Listen. I attached my letter as usual to the leg of our dove, this letter in which I told you everything, this letter that bore our whole future happiness. I had released little Iris, and followed her with my eyes as she sprang into the sky, when suddenly, from the other side of the cloister walls, I heard a gunshot, and saw our dove stop in its flight, flutter and fall. I gave so agonized a shriek, I feared my soul would leave my body. Frantic, I immediately rushed from the convent. It was so obvious that I was in distress that no one tried to stop me. I'd seen in which direction the dove had fallen, and ran that way. 50 paces beyond the walls of the cloister, I saw an officer dressed for the hunt. It was he who had shot the dove. He held it in his hands, gazing with astonishment and some regret at the letter attached to its leg. I approached him with outstretched hands, unable to say anything but woe, woe, woe. 4 steps away I stopped, faint, struck to the heart, as if by lightning. This hunter, this officer who had just shot our dove, was the same I'd seen that night on the Castelnaudary battlefield. It was that same Bittermont who shot you from your horse. We recognized each other. Oh, I tell you, his pallor was almost equal to mine. He saw me dressed as a nun, and realized who it was beneath the sister's habit. "Ah, madame," he whispered, "I am truly desolate." And he handed me our poor dove, who struggled in his hand and fell to the ground. I picked it up. Fortunately, it had only a broken wing. But she holds the secret of your location, my beloved, and this secret she keeps to herself. How can I find you if she can't fly to you? Fly to tell you where to find me, that I'm free, that we should be happy. Oh, beyond doubt, that poor little creature has a soul. If you'd only seen, my beloved, how she looked at me as I carried her into the convent. Meanwhile, motionless and speechless, the assassin's eyes followed me, as they'd followed me when I'd walked away through the blood-stained meadow grass of that battlefield. I don't know if this man will ever be able to make good all the evil he's done, but if there's no redress for this, I'll curse him until my final hour. I laid the dove in a basket, and placed the basket in my lap. Fortunately, the wound hadn't injured her body, just the end of her wing. I detached the blood-splattered letter from her leg. My God, if not for this sudden accident, by now it would almost have reached you. Where are you? Where are you? Who will tell me where to find you? Ah, I'd sent for the convent's doctor, and here he comes. 4 hours later. The doctor is a fine man, a good man. He understands that existence is mysterious and strange, and sometimes the life of a dove is as precious as the life of a king. He understood when he saw my despair, and when he saw the blood-spattered letter. The injury, he said, was minor, and the dove would survive. Once he took off her wing. I snatched her back, and then fell to my knees, saying, "If you take her wing, you take my life. She must fly. She must fly." "To save the wing is much harder," he said, "and I can't answer for its success, but I'll do everything I can. If all goes well, in only 2 or 3 weeks she'll fly once more. So it will take up to 3 weeks. But she'll fly. She'll fly. You understand, my love? All my hope is in this." He bound her wings against her body. She seems to understand, poor thing. She can't move, but she looks at me. I put grain and water within reach of her beak, but she will only take food from my hand. What to do while I wait? How can I tell you what happened? What messenger can I send to find you? How should I know, like a castaway at sea, in which direction to send my distress signal? Why wasn't it one of my arms that was broken, instead of her wing? June. You were right, my beloved. If I hadn't gotten a release from my vows, there would always have been a shadow of remorse on our happiness, or rather, we'd have had no happiness at all, for it would not have been sanctioned by God. When I told you, "I'm free, let's go off together, we'll be happy," I wanted that to be so, but deep in my soul was a voice of regret that, no matter how strong my love, could not be silenced. Today I'm very sad, because I don't know how to find you or see you, but my conscience is clear. And when I repeat, I love you, my husband, I no longer feel the hollow in my heart I'd felt when I said, don't worry, my beloved, we'll be happy. I have cared for our poor Dove as I would have watched over an ailing sister. She suffers, and sometimes I can see the pain in her eyes. Then I bathe her wing in ice water, and it seems to do her good. She strokes me with her pink beak, as if to thank me. Poor Dove! She has no idea how much selfishness there is in the care I give her. But you, my God, what must you be thinking?
23. July 1st, 1638. 2 months have passed, and still no news. My eyes are worn out from scanning the horizon, vainly seeking our beloved Dove. Each black dot I see in the sky, I think, this is it. And then, after a moment, I realize my mistake, and my chest, which had heaved with hope, deflates with a sigh. No matter. I still wait. I still hope. You live. You love me. Why am I so desperate for happiness? But the time passes. It's now 2 months since you left. If I calculate correctly, it's 8 or 10 days since you should have returned. Oh, my God, my God. Would you deny me and turn this heart to bronze, even though she said she still loves me? Lord my God, do not abandon us. 24.
July. Oh, if you knew, poor beloved of my heart, everything I've written to you in the last fortnight. In there you'd see a whole world of thoughts, desires, hopes, regrets, and memories. If we're ever reunited, God willing, as I ardently pray every day, and more so at night, if we're ever reunited, you'll read all of it, and then, only then, I swear to you, will you understand how much you were loved. If we never meet again, oh, all the tortures of hell are wrapped up in that fear. Well, it is I who will reread these letters. It is I who will daily add another note more desperate than that of the day before. It is I who, until I die, will still write, I love you. Each day I think I've exhausted all the anguish and joy in my heart, and then I feel that ahead there are still depths of joy or pain I've not yet glimpsed. Tomorrow. Why does my hand shake so when writing that word? It's because tomorrow will be the day that decides my life. Tomorrow I'll see if our Dove can fly. It's already 3 days since she left the basket. She moves about the room. She stretches her wings. She flits from door to the window. She seems to understand, poor thing, how important it is for us that she finds the strength to fly. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. I will write a short note for her to carry, so as not to load her with unnecessary weight. Just a few words, but enough to tell you everything. Tomorrow, my beloved, I'll spend the night in prayer. I won't even try to sleep. It would be useless. What are you doing to us, God? Do you doubt how much I love, and how much I suffer? July 6th. It's dawn, beloved, and as I told you, I haven't slept for a moment. I spent the night in prayer. I hope God has heard me, and that today you'll know where I am, that I'm free and waiting for you. The Dove is even more anxious than I. It beats against the window with its beak and its wings. We'll open that window, little one. God grant that your wing is strong enough for the trip you're about to take. I interrupt this long letter to write the short note she will carry to you, or perhaps, alas, only try to carry to you. 4 in the morning, July 6th. If our Dove happens to reach you, my beloved, read this post and leave without losing a second, as I would do myself, if only I knew where to find you. I'm free, I love you, and I await you at the convent of Montolieu, between Foix and Tarascon, on the banks of the Ariège. You'll see why I don't write more, why this note is so short, and the paper so thin. You'll know all this, and 1,000 things more, all our misfortunes, our fears, our hopes, if our beloved messenger reaches you. For if that happens, you'll set out at once, won't you? I await you, my beloved, as the blind await the light, as the dying hope for life, and as the dead await resurrection. Go, beloved Dove, go. July 6th, 5 in the morning. We are accursed. Oh, my beloved, what have we come to? There's nothing left for me but to die in tears and despair. She cannot fly. After 100 paces her wing faltered, and she landed in the topmost branches of a poplar she was trying to fly over. But she flew right into it, and branch by branch fell to the ground. I ran to her, arms outstretched, heart breaking. I ran with a moan that became a cry of pain. I picked her up, and she rested a moment, and again tried to fly. And again she fell, and I fell beside her in despair, rolling on the ground, tearing at the grass with my hands and my teeth. My God! My God! What will become of me? I was too proud, too happy, too certain of bliss. I had it all in my grasp, and then fate struck me down, and my dearest treasure is gone. Oh, my Lord, send me an inspiration, a light, a hope. Lord, Lord, help me, pity me, O Lord, I'm going mad. Wait, wait, divine goodness, you hear me, you answer me. Listen, listen, beloved, hope has revived in my heart, hope that comes to me from on high. Listen. From my window, I've often watched the flight of our dove, from when she departs to a distance of, if I'm not mistaken, 2 or 3 leagues. She passes over the sources of the broad stream that flows into the Ariège de Foix. She flies over the small wood of Amortier, then above the Salat between Saint-Giron and Oust. Well, here's what I'll do. I'll don a pilgrim's cloak, and then begin looking for you, starting at the small village of Rieux-Prégon. I always lose sight of the dove near that village. Once I've passed it, I'll find which way to go from her. She can fly about 100 paces at a time. So I'll let her fly 100 paces, rest for a while, and then fly another 100. She'll be my guide, and I'll follow her like the Hebrews followed the column of flame by night and the column of smoke by day, because I, too, am in search of the promised land, and I'll find it, or die of pain or exhaustion along the way. Alas, I know the road will be long. Poor dove, forgive me for how I'll make you suffer. A martyr to our love. The dear thing won't be able to go more than 1 or 2 leagues a day, but no matter, my beloved, for if it takes the rest of my life to find you, oh, then I'll seek you for the rest of my life. So I'm leaving, today, immediately. I've told our Mother Superior everything except your name. She's a worthy woman, a holy woman, who suffered along with my pain and cried along with my tears. She offered to send someone to accompany me, but I refused. I don't want anyone. What I must do, I understand instinctively, involves only heaven and myself. But I promised to write to her if I found you. If I don't write, she'll know I've died, or gone mad, or hidden myself away in the corner of some wood, or along a back road on the bank of a lonely river. I go, carrying with me all these letters I've written that you haven't received, that perhaps you'll never receive. Oh, if one day I can drop them all at your feet and tell you, read, read, my beloved, you will see on that day how I've suffered, but on that day how happy I'll be. I go now. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I hope to make it to Rieux-Prégon before the end of the day. July 7th. At night. Before leaving, I passed through the chapel, in order to bring God, as it were, along with me. I prostrated myself before the altar, pressed my forehead on the carved stone where the sculptor had carved a cross, and I prayed. Oh, it's true, there is a comfort in prayer. Prayer is the green knoll where one sits and rests after a tiring journey. Prayer is the cool stream where one finds refreshment in the middle of the desert. I left the chapel full of strength and hope, feeling like God had attached angels' wings to my shoulders. It has always been prayer that lifted me from the earth and carried me to the Lord. This is only a test, Lord, is it not? You haven't cursed me, have you, my Lord? That's not what I'll find, will I, Lord, at the end of this road I've only just begun? Wait for me, beloved, wait for me, because I swear, one day soon, I'll get there. I've paused for a moment to lean on the sill of a window that looks out toward the village of Bussenac. That village is along my road, and I'll reach it tomorrow, unless our dove takes me a different way. A dog is sadly howling, probably lost in the small wood I see to my right, a dark blot on the landscape. I said to myself, if the dog stops howling, it will be a good omen, a sign that I'll find him. And the dog fell silent. One is superstitious when suffering, don't you think, my heart's beloved? Are you suffering too? Dear God, what a beautiful night. I imagine you're at your window as I am at this one, looking toward me as I look toward you, thinking about me and God as I think about God and you. Did you see that lovely shooting star that carved a fiery furrow across the sky? How many miles did it cover in just a second? Oh, if only I had the power to reach you in a second, even if, as I arrived, I sparked and burnt out, I would embrace such a bright second of happiness, even if what followed was eternal night. Tomorrow, my beloved, tomorrow, I hope, I will be nearer to you than ever. July 9th. I've stopped at a small village named Soulon. Dear God, what a storm! What had the earth done for the Lord to menace it in such a terrible voice? The water fell in torrents and swelled the Sala, making it impossible to ford. I'd have to go back to Saint-Giron to find a bridge, and that would cost me 2 days. I've been told that tomorrow, once the river ebbs to its usual level, I should be able to resume my journey. Oh, a day lost, a day during which you await me, a day in which perhaps you'll lose hope in me. July 12th, evening, in the village of Allo. A farmer agreed to be my guide, and I crossed the river on his mule. In the river there was a moment, only a third of the way across, when all was almost lost. The beast stumbled in its footing, and I looked up to heaven, crossed my hands on my chest and said, "If I die, my God, you know I died for him. But you see, all must be well, since I didn't die." July 15th. My marathon continues, guided as ever by our dove. On the 13th, we went from Allo to Castillon. That was a big day for our poor girl. I should have been more sorry for her. We must have gone 3 leagues. The next day, the 14th, I was repaid for my cruelty of the day before, as we made barely a league. Now it's the 15th, and I've reached Saint-Lary, just across a small unnamed stream that flows into the Sala. At least I'm sure I'm on the right road. The dove doesn't hesitate for a moment, doesn't deviate for a second. She goes straight ahead without pause. Only, time is passing, while still you wait. Time is flying toward the day you take your vow. Oh, that vow! Be in no haste to take it, beloved. Believe in me, believe in your Isabel. If you doubt me for a moment, it could cost us everything. July 18th. For 3 days I've wandered almost at random, through woods and along streams. Alas, the air lacks the obstacles of the land, and the dove often goes where I can't. I confess, oh my beloved, that for once my courage and strength have failed me, and I've collapsed at the foot of a tree, desperate and dying. It's already 11 days since I left, and I've covered only 15 to 18 leagues of what she flew in only an hour when she was our messenger of love, flying fast as an arrow above the miserable beings who call themselves kings of creation, but haven't the abilities of a bird, and must take 11 days to travel what a dove can do in an hour. Tell me, how can it be that a wretched magnetic needle knows where north is, while I, a thinking being, made in the image of God, don't know where you are? How is it a ship can sail from one point in the world, go to the far side of the earth, and find a particular island in the ocean, while I can't seem to find you, though you were close enough to speak to or reach out and touch? Oh, I know well, dear God, that if I want to find him, it's not to him, but to you that I must reach out. My God, support me. My God, go with me. My God, guide me. July 29th. I returned to my senses, to daylight, to life. I nearly died, my beloved, and few would disbelieve that then, at last, I'd know where you are, for the dead know everything. Few would disbelieve that the ghost of your Isabel could enter your cell at night, in the hour when the spirits walk. And that's why I wish to live. If you saw my shadow, you'd have known I was dead. Whereas if you see neither my shadow nor my body, you may think I've only forgotten or betrayed you. Don't say, alas, that you no longer believe in me, for I haven't forgotten or betrayed you. I love you. I love you. I nearly died. That's all. Do you remember the dying soldier I saw that night, who dragged himself to the stream, leaking his last drops of blood, gasping his last breath, yearning for water, and then dying at his first swallow. Well, that was almost me. After a long trek through a forest that I was told was called the Mourlion, I arrived breathless at a spring. This spring came right out of the rock and was icy cold. I drank, thinking it would restore my strength and I could continue my journey. I continued, but walked for only 100 steps and then stopped, shivering. A chill overcame me, and I fainted beside the small path I was following. I don't know what happened after I passed out. All I know is that yesterday, when I came to, the light was very dim. I looked around and found myself in a fairly clean room, on a bed, watched from its foot by an unknown woman. Beside me on the bed perched our dove, stroking my cheek with her poor, wounded wing. This woman had found me while returning with 2 men from the Mourlion market. They saw I was still breathing, took pity on me, and brought me where I am now. Where I am is a small village near Nestier, or so I've been told. The room I'm in must be at some altitude, because from my bed, out the windows, I can see only sky. The sky. The sky is the only road to he who awaits me. Yesterday I asked the date, and was told it was July 28th. Alas, I've spent more than 20 days in my wandering. Where am I? Near to you or far? I asked for paper, ink, and a pen, but after tracing just a few letters, my head was swimming and I couldn't continue. Tonight I'm better, and can write almost without tiring. I've had to stop only 3 or 4 times so far while writing this letter. I thank the woman who was watching over me. I no longer need constant care. I'm better. I feel strong. Tonight I'll try to get up, and tomorrow resume my journey. It would kill me to just lie here while you're waiting for me, as you'd expect, wouldn't you, my heart's beloved, who waits for me? The dove is also well rested. I hope it will be capable of longer flights, and therefore guide me to you more quickly. I'd planned to spend all night in writing to you, but I'd overestimated my strength. I must stop. I must say good night to you. My ears are ringing. The room spins around me, and my pen seems to trace letters of fire. Ah! 9 in the morning. I slept for 2 hours or so, a horrible, restless sleep, more like delirium. Fortunately, upon opening my eyes, I saw the day was almost born. Oh, my beloved, what a beautiful thing daybreak would be, if we were near each other, and watched together as the stars disappeared, all those stars whose names you know, and that merge and disappear into the ether ahead of the sun, who chases them and appears in his turn. I just opened my window to gaze out upon a huge expanse. Alas, the more land I see, the more lost I feel. My God, the love story of Theseus and Ariadne, was it truly just a fable? My prayer, deep, ardent, and eternal, is that you'll send me some blessed angel who will bring me a thread that leads me to him. Oh, I listen, I watch, I wait. But there is nothing, dear God, nothing. Only the sun, that is to say, your image, which, still tinted pink, colours the atmosphere above and the mountain behind which it rises. If only my heart were calm, this spectacle would be beautiful. The hills emerge, their blue outlines silhouetted against the golden rays, showing their lovely and graceful forms. The ridge of mountains that girds the southern horizon is vast and beautiful, with snowy peaks that shimmer and sparkle like the flames of a divine star. A great river appears, crossing the plain, broad and majestic, like— oh, my God! My God! I can't be mistaken. The angel I begged for, pleaded for. He came, invisible but real. Those hills behind which the sun rises, the double crest he tops, these snowy mountains that seem like silver pillars supporting the vault of heaven, that great river flowing from north to south, taking in tributaries as a sovereign receives his subjects. It's the hills, the mountains, the river he described to me, that he sees from his window. My horizon is his. My God, did I lose my way, only to find at last my road to him? Did you close my eyes just to show me the light I'd see when they opened? My God, your mercy is infinite. You are great, you are holy, you are good, and it is only on my knees that I should address you. Kneel, therefore, faithless heart, who doubted the goodness of the Lord. On your knees. On your knees. 4 a.m. I have thanked God, and I depart. My strength came back to me with my faith. I was weak only because I was desperate. But first, a final look. Oh, it's your picture to the life, my beloved. Painter, I have seen your vision. Poet, it is as you described so well. There are the peaks of the Pyrenees, changing from white to shining silver, their dark sides gradually lightening from black to purple to blue, as a flood of light flows down from the high peaks. There the daylight spreads across the plain. There are the streams that glisten like silver strands. There the river that twists and undulates like a ribbon of satin. Here are the birds, singing in the oleander bushes, the pomegranates and clumps of myrtle, and there flies the eagle, king of the sky, circling in the ether. Oh, my beloved, we are joined in vision, and I see what you see. Only, from where do you see it? Wait. Your letter is here. Oh, your letters, they don't leave my side for a moment. When I die, they'll be next to my heart, and those who lay me in the grave will be charged under pain of sacrilege to bury them with me. From where do you see it? Dear God, it's as if I just read it. Fortunately, I know them by heart. If I lose them, I could rewrite them without missing a word. I've read them so often. My window is surrounded by a luxuriant jasmine whose branches are laden with flowers. They scent my room as they open with the rising sun. That's it. The sun has just risen to my left, so you are to my right. The plateau beneath me slopes down from south to north, from the mountains to the plains. That's it, exactly. Yes, that's the very horizon. Thank you, Lord, for making the day so clear. Yonder are the highlands where I'll find your hermitage. Oh, why are they still so far away, and why is the human eye so feeble? I see hundreds of white specks scattered among the green trees. Which of all these white specks is your hermitage? Oh, darling dove, beloved dove, daughter of heaven, it's up to you to tell me that. I go, my beloved, I go. Each minute of delay is a minute stolen from our happiness. To delay is to tempt Providence, for wasn't it only by the delay of a minute that you lost me? Come, dove, yes, tomorrow, perhaps even tonight, we'll see him again. July 31st. The night has interrupted my search, beloved, but I hope. I questioned everyone I met, and was finally shown, on a distant ridge, a Canal d'Olise monastery, and near it a small house that looks to me like the one you described. I saw it shining through the rising mists of evening. Perhaps it's yours. Perhaps you looked out over your horizon without knowing that it hid, invisible to your eyes, a poor anxious creature who lives only for you, and will die without you. I was told that that small house is inhabited by a recluse, a sage and man of God, but one still young and handsome. That man is you, my beloved, is it not? It's you, and if so, during the day sometimes you must visit the village of Camon, where I am now. You once visited a poor carpenter who broke his leg falling from a roof. You took care of him, and healed him. When the whole family kneeled before you as you were leaving, you said, if you are consoled, pray for the consoler. Oh, that's you. I recognize your sorrowful way of speaking. You wait for me, not knowing what's become of me, and you suffer. You suffer because you doubt. Oh, man must always doubt. If you didn't doubt, I'd think you were dead. To think that if I'd arrived here only 2 hours earlier, I might perhaps have met you. I say perhaps, for if I was sure it had been you, it would break me. I'd hire a guide. I'd even have them carry me. But what if I was wrong? Our dove's instinct is the best guide of all. She hasn't deviated for a moment. If by some fate I just missed you, I can still rely on her. What are you doing at this moment, wherever you are, my beloved? Unless you are thinking of God, I hope you're thinking of me. It's 11 o'clock. Tomorrow. This great hope, too strong not to have come from heaven, says I'll see you. Tomorrow.
25. July 31st, 11 o'clock. I don't know if you're returning to me, heart's beloved, but hurry. Midnight approaches, and the stroke of midnight will end the last day of my life as part of the world. Tomorrow is the day on which I'm to take my vows.
I waited religiously for the full 3 months, but I cannot forever postpone my promise to God. God speaks to me, since you are silent. God calls me, since you leave me alone. Oh, it's not without deep sorrow that I renounce this hope. If only you had come, if but for a moment. I have dwelled, body and soul, in the past, that is to say, in happiness. It will cost me more to set aside that happiness than it would cost me to set aside life. The life of the cloister, no matter what people say, is neither death of the body nor death of the soul. I have often examined corpses, cast my eyes over their pale and livid faces, and it's only the material flesh that has broken down. No dream stirs in those sleeping brains, no pain, physical or moral, afflicts those flaccid fibres. I have often examined, on the other hand, these living corpses called monks. Their faces are as pale or paler than those of the dead, but their visages are not those of the deceased. Tears flow forever from their hearts, a deep and inexhaustible source that reddens their eyes, sinking them in their sockets, and ploughs bitter furrows down their cheeks. By this we recognize God's suffering elect, whom I hope at least derive some comfort from his love. The nervous energy that drives the living animates them only with sadness. It's neither the composure of life nor the quiet of the grave. It's the agony, the fever of slow consumption, the withering from this world to the next, from life to death, from the cradle to the grave. Well, Isabel, I can fool myself no longer, and postpone the abyss by plumbing its depths. I too will embark on this agony, in hopes it will quickly carry me to death. Goodbye. I shall spend the night in prayer. The monastery bells will sound at 2 o'clock to say that a soul, though not a body, is leaving the earth for heaven. At 9 in the morning, those who will be my brothers in God will come for me. August 1st, 5 in the morning. I just saw my life's last rising of the sun. He has never been brighter, more splendid, more magnificent. What matter to him the pains of this poor little world he illuminates? What matter the tears I shed that drown this paper? I've watched his dawn break for about 10 short minutes, and already he drinks the dew that trembles at the tip of a blade of grass, or glistens like a diamond in the petalled chalice of a flower. I shall never see his dawn again. The cell assigned to me looks into a high-walled courtyard. Through an archway I can just glimpse the corner of the cemetery. I'll try to have them put my grave in that corner. I want it to be as close as possible, so the journey will be short. Now, pray. 9 in the morning. The chanting approaches. They're coming for me. I don't want those men coming in here. I don't want them to see your letters, or what I've been writing. I don't want them to see my tears. I'll wait on the threshold. My soul remains with you. They bear away only my corpse. Adieu. The cry that rose from all of creation at the death of the Son of God was not deeper, more agonizing, or more lamentable than that which I utter at the death of our love. Adieu, adieu, adieu. 26. 10 o'clock. Your empty chamber. Your letter wet with tears. Your final goodbye. I arrived half an hour too late. If only your vows have not yet been spoken. My God, give me strength. O dove, my dove, if only I had your wings, broken though they are. 27. This fragment of a letter was found in the archives of the Ursuline convent at Montolieu, but the first part is missing. At daybreak, I left the village of Camon, where I told you, dear Mother Superior, everything had led me to believe he sometimes spent the day. I had questioned the entire family of the poor injured carpenter, and I would have known him from their descriptions, even if my heart hadn't already told me it was him. Moreover, the words he'd spoken upon leaving them, if you are consoled, pray for the consoler, those could have come only from a suffering soul preparing to give himself to God. My strength was restored by the hope of seeing him again. I set out on foot, for if I took a horse or a carriage, I'd have had to make a wide detour to reach that white speck beside the vast, dark Camaldolese monastery, which, though almost 3 leagues off as the crow flies, sent me the sound of its bells on the wings of the wind. Upon leaving the village, I let fly the dove. The poor dear made one of its longest flights, nearly 200 paces toward the house my eyes devoured. There was no doubt. I was headed toward the goal she'd shown me with the last of her strength. Unfortunately, there was no marked path. I had to follow the slope of the mountain, sometimes split by ravines, sometimes crossed by streams, sometimes cloaked with small woods which I dared not enter, for fear of losing myself. I walked 3 hours without pause, but due to these detours, I covered only 2 leagues. The house was often out of sight, and without my darling dove, I'd have been lost. I cast her in the air and followed wherever her flight led me. Finally, it seemed to me my route became a bit easier. I heard the bells of a small village sounding 8 o'clock. I don't know why, but the tone of the bells seemed so sad, I felt my heart clench. It seemed that every hour, as it passed me on wings of bronze, pealed out, "Hurry! Hurry!" So I hurried, and soon I could distinguish the details of the house. As I approached, I recognized it from the description he'd given me, the window through which he watched the sunrise, and the jasmine that shaded the window and seemed to me like a green palisade. For a moment I thought I could see him in that window, and whether illusion or reality, I spread my arms and shouted. Alas, he was still over a mile away, and neither saw nor heard me. The bells of the monastery were ringing. I remembered the continual peals of the bells the night before I took the veil, and a terrible suspicion crept into my mind and heart that these bells tolled for the same reason. But I shook my head and told myself, no, no, no! As I approached, I saw a long procession of monks make their way to the little white house and then, moments later, return toward the monastery. Who did they seek in that house? Someone alive or dead? Soon I'd know, for I was barely 100 steps from the house when suddenly a deep mountain stream barred my way. It was a steep cascade, muddy and full of rocks, so deep I didn't dare try to cross it. I climbed toward its source, despite my fatigue, but it felt like I'd never reached that house before my fleeting strength abandoned me. After a quarter-hour's walk, I found a tree that had fallen across the chasm. At any other time, I wouldn't have dared to venture upon so flimsy a bridge, but I leapt onto it, my feet sure, my eye fixed on the far side, and then I was across. There I found, instead of obstacles, a sort of paved path. So I went ever faster as I approached. I reached my desired goal. The door was open. I crossed the threshold. A stairway opened to my right, and I rushed up it without calling out. I hadn't dared breathe since passing the doorway. I was convinced I'd find an empty room. The chamber was empty, the window open, and a letter was on the table, all wet with tears. This letter, oh, my mother, it was less than half an hour old, and it was his final farewell. I had arrived half an hour too late. He was at the church, taking his vows. I felt the house shiver beneath my feet. Everything seemed to spin around me. I began a shriek that would end as my last breath, when suddenly the thought came that maybe his sacrifice wasn't yet made, his vows were not yet pronounced. I rushed out of the house, instinctively taking my dove, which had perched on a branch of the blessed jasmine. The monastery was no more than 100 paces away, but I felt my strength would fail me before I reached the church. My brain was empty of thought, my lungs gasped for air. I heard the priests singing the Magnificat. I heard the organ playing the Veni Creator. My God, I had only seconds, no more. And woe betide me, as luck would have it, I'd gone around the wrong side of the apse. The door was on the other side. The window to the nave was open, but how could I hope my voice would be heard above the organ and the chanting of the monks? I tried to shout, but all my chest could produce was a dull rattle. It was a moment in which it seemed all was lost. All was in vain. My mind was confusion, my thoughts were a blur. And then, in the midst of this chaos came a light, and a fire lit my heart. I cast my dove through the window, and fell in a swoon. Heaven be praised, when I came to, I was in his arms. He already wore the robe of a monk, and had the tonsure of a priest. But he was mine, 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 then and forever. The oath was upon his lips when the dove, like the Holy Spirit descending on a sunbeam, had interrupted it. Beloved dove, your image will be carved on our tomb, asleep on our intertwined hands. I promised I would write to you if I found him, Mother Superior. God, in his infinite mercy, has allowed me to find him, and so I write. Your respectful and ever-grateful daughter, Isabelle de Lautrec, Comtesse de Morey, Palermo, September 10th, 1638.
Translator's Notes. Imagine it's the middle of the 19th century. You're a well-educated Englishman or American, and it's your job to translate popular French literature into English. You are fully conversant with then-contemporary standards of the English language, in which proper writing is formal, staid, and largely in the passive voice. Everyone agrees that elevated diction is the hallmark of cultured literacy. Then your publisher assigns you to translate a new novel by Alexandre Dumas. What on earth is this? It isn't proper French, like Chateaubriand or Alfred de Vigny, or even that young firebrand, Victor Hugo, who at least writes solid, conventional prose. This fellow Dumas writes in a disturbingly dynamic style, propelling his story's action with vigorous language, in sentences that are strangely short and direct. His theatrical dialogue is sharp, punchy, and concise, almost like the way real people talk. There's violence in the tale, sudden and brutal, and erotic thoughts and behaviour are depicted in a frank and open manner, quite unsuitable to a general audience. In short, while the writing has an undeniable power of sorts, it's rather vulgar and must be corrected. And correct it these translators did. To be fair, those gentlemen knew their business, and gave their English and American readers what they expected, which was historical adventure in the tone and manner of popular authors like Sir Walter Scott and James Fenimore Cooper, a style stiff and stuffy by our modern standards, but entirely in line with the expectations of the day. Their translations of Dumas, conventional and Baudelarized though they were immensely popular, and they made Alexandre Dumas a brand name that stood for historical adventure with vivid characters and engaging, fast-moving stories. But these early translations, endlessly reprinted and, in many cases, still the only available English versions, haven't aged very well. For most 21st century readers, they seem awkward, dense, and difficult, more trouble than they're worth, really. And that does Dumas a terrible disservice, because his writing was truly ahead of its time, a precursor to the more direct, earthy styles of Mark Twain, Bret Harte, and Robert Louis Stevenson. He was, in many ways, a very modern author, who wrote in a theatrical, almost cinematic style, and this should come as no surprise when you consider that he started out as a playwright, whose early fame came from lurid melodramas that shocked and captivated Parisian theatre-goers. Dumas wrote in scenes, vivid set-pieces, conveyed by sharp action and even sharper dialogue, punchy lines meant to carry impact all the way to the cheap seats at the back of the hall. For us, here in the 21st century, after 100 years of Hemingway, Hammett, and Hollywood, original unvarnished Dumas delivers exactly the kind of storytelling we want. As a fan of contemporary adventure fiction, I'm here to tell you that translating Alexandre Dumas for the modern reader is a lot of fun. The man was the living embodiment of joie de vivre, and that love of life permeates every line of his tales. His vibrant characters, trembling with passion, practically leap off the page, their lines rapped out in snappy patter that might have been written by Ben Hecht or Lawrence Kasdan. In short, Dumas rocks, and his work deserves to be presented in a fashion contemporary readers can appreciate. So much for Dumas in general. Now let's turn to The Red Sphinx in specific. It's a work from late in the master's career, and while it's not quite in the class of his early masterworks like The Three Musketeers or Monte Cristo, it's definitely comparable, and when Dumas has the bit in his teeth, the story still races along like his best work. With The Red Sphinx, Dumas was making a deliberate attempt to recapture the glory of his early triumphs, and in the main he succeeded. The characters are as captivating and charming as any of their predecessors, especially Cardinal Richelieu, a figure Dumas clearly admired, and whose weaknesses are depicted as lovingly as his strengths. The action sequences are taut and exciting, the heroes are bold and clever, the period details ring true, and the king's jester always manages to get in a zinger as the last word. If only it had an ending. Fortunately, that's where The Dove comes in. As mentioned in the introduction, I think part of the reason Dumas couldn't wrap up this novel is that he'd already written an ending for his protagonists 15 years earlier, and couldn't get easily from Moray as Richelieu's protégé in 1630 to Moray as his antagonist in 1632. And when his publishing vehicle, Les Nouvelles, went on the rocks, he just shrugged and gave it up. Does The Dove really do the job of wrapping up the story of the Comte de Moray and Isabelle de Lautrec? I would argue that it does, and in spades. It was the only story Dumas ever wrote in epistolary or exchange of letters form, but he used that stylistic constraint to great effect. An unabashed romance, Dumas wrote it when still at the height of his powers, and the language is concise and emotionally compelling. Unlike the novel that precedes it, the pacing of The Dove is flawless, generating significant suspense, even as we know in our hearts how it must turn out, finally culminating in a perfectly timed and entirely satisfying climax. Some editorial notes. The Red Sphinx originally appeared in Les Nouvelles in 4 parts, or volumes, with the chapter numbering restarting with each new volume. Since these divisions seem nowadays confusing and arbitrary, for the sake of simplicity and streamlining, I abandoned that structure and just numbered the chapters sequentially from 1 to 74. Also, Dumas' spelling of character and place names was occasionally inconsistent from one part of the novel to the next. I have tried to remedy this by settling on one spelling in each case, usually the most historically recognizable. Speaking of history, just how accurate in that regard are the events of the Red Sphinx? In the main, Dumas' account of King Louis's court and Richelieu's Transalpine campaigns of 1629 and 1630 is on the money, though the side adventures of the Comte de Moray and Etienne Latil are entirely invented. In fact, we don't know for sure exactly what the historical Comte de Moray was doing during the French invasion of Piedmont and Savoy, but no one can prove he wasn't involved in it, and that was good enough for Dumas. As for The Dove, did Antoine de Bourbon really survive the Battle of Castelnaudary that ended Prince Gaston's 4th rebellion against his brother, King Louis? According to history, almost certainly not, despite the persistent rumours and legends of the time that had him surviving in seclusion until late into the 17th century. But, as with the rumours about who was really behind the assassination of King Henri IV, Dumas always preferred to follow gossip and scandal, because they invariably make better stories. The reader who wants to know more about the historical characters in the Red Sphinx is invited to visit the translator's website, www.swashbucklingadventure.net, and click through to the Red Sphinx page. There are other articles and reviews on the site that may be of interest as well. Feel free to drop in and leave a comment. Publication history. Dumas' final visit to the milieu of the Musketeers has an interesting publishing history. The Red Sphinx, or Le Comte de Moray, as it was then known, was first published as a serial in the Parisian weekly Les Nouvelles from October 17, 1865 to March 23, 1866. Because it was unfinished, and because the author's brand of historical adventure was temporarily out of vogue in France, at the time it received no book publication in its author's native land, and wouldn't for the better part of a century. However, Dumas' name still had considerable cachet in the United States, where all his works were in print, and publishers were even commissioning ghostwriters to concoct sequels to his bestsellers that they then unashamedly published under his name. Even an unfinished novel by Dumas was considered worthy of publication, and late in 1866, Le Comte de Moray appeared in a French language and probably unauthorized edition from the tiny New York publisher H. de Marais as part of their Bibliothèque du Messager Franco-Américain series. It was presumably this edition that the prolific hack writer, Henry L. Williams, Jr., used as the basis of his English translation, which appeared as The Count of Moray from the likewise tiny Philadelphia publisher Peterson Brothers in 1868. Though Williams wrote his own ending to the novel, in which Moray personally broke the siege of Casale at the head of a troop of swashbucklers before dying in Latille's arms, it was an awful translation, and the book disappeared without a ripple. In fact, there may be no more than 3 copies still in existence. For the curious, bits of this lost translation can be found in The Works of Dumas, a 1-volume collection of novel excerpts published in 1927 by the Walter J. Black Company of New York, without editorial attribution. And that was the end of the story for the Red Sphinx, or would have been, if not for a dramatic event, so unlikely that it could have come from the pen of the master himself. In 1945, Dumas' original handwritten manuscript of the novel, or at least the first 3/4 of it, was unexpectedly discovered in near-perfect condition in a Paris garret, according to Dumas' bibliographer, Frank Wild Reed. After authentication by experts, the text was entirely in Dumas' well-known longhand. This manuscript version was published as Le Comte de Moray in 1946, in 2 volumes, by Paris publisher Éditions Universelles. It was republished in 1964 by Éditions Gallique, appearing for the first time under the title Le Sphinx Rouge. In general, the 1946 manuscript version differed little from what had appeared in Les Nouvelles 80 years before. Some spelling differences, such as Latille, with an H, instead of Latille, and Pisani, with an I, instead of Pisani. With one notable exception, the manuscript contained an entire chapter omitted from the published serial version. Upon reading this missing chapter, titled Les Habitués de l'Hôtel de Rambouillet, one quickly sees why it was omitted, as it is no more than 3,500 words about the amusing eccentricities of certain members of the Rambouillet household and social set. This series of anecdotes, mainly lifted from the Historiette of Tallemant d'Hérault, are just the kind of juicy historical gossip Dumas delighted in, but they add exactly nothing to the progress of the novel. In fact, they stop the book dead in its tracks. I think Dumas, or his editor, Jules Noriac, made the right decision in leaving this chapter out, and I followed their example for this edition of the Red Sphinx. As noted above, the original French version of the novel had first been published in book form in the United States as Le Comte de Moray in 1866, but as of the first years of our current century, it still had yet to appear in the author's native France. To rectify this, prominent Romanian editor Radu Portocala painstakingly mined original copies of Les Nouvelles out of the depths of the French Bibliothèque Nationale to compile a full serial version of Dumas' incomplete novel. And, thanks to his work, 2008 finally saw the first complete French book publication of Le Sphinx Rouge, Éditions Krios, Paris. Portocala even included the lost Habitué chapter from the 1946 manuscript version, so if you want to read this novel in the original French, that's the edition this editor recommends. The Dove, in French La Colombe, was originally published in 1850 in Brussels by Alphonse Lebègue, and then the following year in Paris by Cadeau. A novella, or short novel, it was an awkward length for book publication, and wasn't printed much again until publishers started compiling Dumas' complete works in the 1870s, after his death. The only known English version prior to the current edition was by the noted English translator Arthur Allinson, published by Methuen and Company in London in 1906, in combination with another short Dumas novel, Maître Adam. It's a rather rare edition, and this editor hasn't actually seen it. But I've read other Allinson translations of Dumas, and they're pretty good. This volume's version of The Dove is the story's first appearance in English in the United States. Dramatis Personae.
Historical character notes. Encre. See Concini. Angélie. L'Angélie. King's Fool to Louis XIII. Not much is known about King Louis's fou de titre, other than that he was said to have been of a noble family but poor, and may have been an equerry to the Prince de Condé before entering the king's service. Anne. Anne d'Autriche, Anne of Austria, Queen of France, 1601 to 1666, eldest daughter of King Philip III of Spain and sister to King Philip IV. Anne was wed to King Louis XIII of France in a political marriage at the age of 14. A Spaniard among the French, unloved by the king, proud but intimidated, and vulnerable to manipulation by her friends, Dumas' depiction of Anne is, in the main, accurate. The eventual mother of Louis XIV, she will outlive her husband and reign as regent in her son's name, appearing as a major character in the next novel in the cycle, 20 years after. Baradas. Chevalier François de Baradas, Monsieur Baradas, royal equerry and king's favourite in 1628 to 1629, the handsome but shallow Baradas fell from Louis's favour after engaging in an illegal duel. Bassompierre, François de Bassompierre, Marshal of France, Colonel-General of the Swiss Guard, 1579 to 1646. A gentleman of Lorraine, this suave and adaptable chevalier was successively a favourite of Henri IV, Queen Regent Marie de Medici, and Louis XIII, and one of the leading ornaments of their courts, especially by his own estimation. As a general, a lover, a diplomat, and above all a courtier, he cut a swath, but delved too deep into intrigue and spent the last years of his life in the Bastille. His lively memoirs of the period are among Dumas' primary sources. Boutroux, Guillaume Boutroux, Comte de Serron, 1588 to 1685. Courtier, wit, poet, and diplomat, Boutroux was one of Richelieu's trusted envoys. A mediocre writer, he was nonetheless one of the founding members in 1634 of the Académie Française, mainly due to his association with its patron, the Cardinal. Berengon. Henri, Comte de Berengon, Premier Valet de Chambre, Monsieur le Premier, 1603 to 1692. The king's loyal valet. His weakness was pride, and he would be banished in 1630 after falling for Madame de Fargy and conspiring with her and Vautier. Bérulle, Cardinal Pierre de Bérulle, 1575 to 1629. Though eventually outmanoeuvred and sidelined by Richelieu, as a leader of the devout party and ally of the Queen Mother, Bérulle was a big noise in the early years of the reign of Louis XIII. Though influential at the time, he wasn't a deep thinker, and was important mainly as a figurehead of the pro-Spanish faction opposed to Cardinal Richelieu. Bois-Robert, François Le Mettel de Bois-Robert, Le Bois, 1592 to 1662. One of the Cardinal's 5 poets, Bois-Robert was a diligent aide in all Richelieu's literary pursuits, and the prime mover in the founding of the Académie Française. A priest before becoming a poet, his sharp-tongued irreverence frequently offended the devout, but he was nonetheless granted posts as a canon and abbot. After Richelieu's death, he attempted to transfer his loyalty to Mazarin, but the Italian didn't care for him, so he turned his hand to writing plays, at which he prospered until well into the late 1650s. Brancard, Charles de Villars, Comte de Brancard, Marquis de Maubec et d'Onnille, 1618 to 1681. Though well known at the salons of the Hôtel de Rambouillet at a later date, Brancard was too young in 1629 to be the crony of Voiture and Pisani depicted in the Red Sphinx, as Dumas was doubtless well aware. But the author had a weakness for likeable buffoons, so he added a decade or two to Brancard's age, which gave him an excuse to recount some amusing anecdotes. Brancard really came into his own during Anne's regency, when he was a knight of honour to the Queen. Buckingham. George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, 1592 to 1628. Favourite and boy-toy of both King James I of England and his son, Charles I. Buckingham was handsome, brilliant, charming, manipulative, politically savvy, an inveterate womanizer, and, thanks to his royal patrons, the most powerful man in the English court.
a narcissist of epic proportions. From 1625 to 1628, he conducted a clandestine and illicit flirtation with Queen Anne of France that infuriated Louis XIII. Buckingham, and thus England, supported the Huguenots of La Rochelle when that city was besieged by Louis and Cardinal Richelieu, and he was on the verge of leading a relief expedition to raise the siege when he was assassinated in Portsmouth on August 23, 1628, an assassination, according to the plot of the Three Musketeers, engineered by an agent of Cardinal Richelieu. Contemporary accounts relate that Anne of Austria was shocked by his death and genuinely mourned the passing of her chivalrous would-be lover. Cardinal, see Richelieu. Cavois, Captain. François d'Augier, Sieur de Cavois, Captain of the Cardinal's Guards. Died 1641. Cavois was the first captain of the Cardinal's Guard, though that company wasn't actually formed until 1634. A gentleman of the petty nobility, the stolid Cavois' royal service to Richelieu was the making of his fortune, so much so that one of his sons became a Marshal of France. Cavois died fighting the Spanish at the siege of Bapaume in Flanders. Curiously, Dumas refers to him as de Cavois in The Three Musketeers, but denies him the nobiliary particle in the Red Sphinx, possibly to emphasize the cardinal's willingness to promote men of low rank if they showed talent and loyalty. Cavois, Madame. Marie, not Mireille, de Laure. Madame de Cavois. Died 1665. Dumas got his anecdotes about Madame de Cavois from the Historiette of Tallemant des Réaux, who said of the lady, "Never did any wife love her husband more." The two of them had 10 children, and Tallemant says that it was in order to support them after her husband's death that Richelieu gave her 1/2 the Parisian monopoly on covered sedan chairs. The reality is less romantic. When the cardinal awarded 1/2 of the monopoly to Soucarrière in 1639, he gave the other half to Capitaine de Cavois as a reward for his loyal service. Chalais. Henri de Talleyrand-Périgord, Comte de Chalais, 1599 to 1626. Chalais, one of Louis's handsome young favourites and the master of the king's wardrobe, came under the influence of the Duchesse de Chevreuse and joined one of Prince Gaston's early conspiracies against Richelieu and the king. When the cabal was discovered and broken up, the high-ranking plotters mostly escaped punishment. Chalais, a mere tool, was made the scapegoat, and was executed in a spectacularly bungled beheading that took the amateur headsman hired for the job over 30 blows to complete. Charles Emmanuel, see Savoy. Charpentier. Denis Charpentier, first secretary to Cardinal Richelieu. Died 1647. Richelieu's loyal, long-time secretary had come with him from Poitou, and had been in the cardinal's service since at least 1608. He was entrusted with the keys to the cardinal's coffers, an important role at a time when governments did their business on a cash basis. Charpentier outlived his master, and was remembered in Richelieu's will. Chevreuse. Marie-Aimée de Rohan-Montbazon, Duchesse de Chevreuse, 1600 to 1679. One of the most remarkable women in a century full of remarkable women, Marie de Rohan was a vector of chaos, who challenged every social convention of her time with wit, cheer, charm, and unshakable self-confidence. Throughout the reign of Louis XIII, she was a steadfast friend and ally to Anne of Austria, when the Queen had few of either. Brilliant, beautiful, free-spirited, mischievous, adored and adorable, she had a long list of lovers on both sides of the English Channel, many of whom ended up dead or in prison, thanks to her habit of involving them in plots and conspiracies against the French crown. She first came to prominence in 1617, when she married Albert de Luynes, Louis's former falconer and first favourite, whom the king elevated to the rank of Duke and Constable of the French armies. When Luynes fell from favour in 1621, and died of a convenient bout of purple fever, Marie avoided obscurity by quickly marrying the Duc de Chevreuse, a wealthy Lorraine noble and perennial ornament of the French court. Marie and her second husband had what nowadays would be called an open marriage, leaving Madame de Chevreuse free to pursue her own interests, which were romance and treason in equal measure, mixing the two whenever possible. She was involved in every notable conspiracy of the reign of Louis XIII and was an inveterate enemy of Cardinal Richelieu. La Chevreuse continued to intrigue after the death of both king and cardinal, and will play a prominent part in 20 Years After, the next novel in Dumas' Musketeers cycle. Christine Marie de Bourbon, Princess of Piedmont, 1606 to 1663. Like King Louis's other two sisters, Princess Christine was married off at a young age to a foreign monarch, but she must have drawn the short straw, because whereas Elizabeth got Spain and Henriette got England, Christine ended up in the relatively minor Duchy of Savoy. But of the three daughters of France, she was probably the only one whose marriage could be called even remotely happy. In 1619, she was wed to Victor Amadeus, Prince of Piedmont and heir to Charles Emmanuel, the Duke of Savoy. Thereafter she was known as Princess of Piedmont, until Victor Amadeus assumed the throne upon the death of his father, after which she was Duchess of Savoy. After the death of Victor Amadeus in 1637, she successfully ruled Savoy for another quarter-century as Duchess and Regent. Coetmont, Jacqueline Levoyer d'Escaumont, or Coismont, or Cotemont, Dame de Coetmont, 1585 to 1618. A lady in the service of Henriette d'Entragues, the embittered former mistress of King Henri IV, Jacqueline Levoyer became acquainted with the regicide Ravaillac when he stayed at the Entragues estate, and was later implicated in the king's assassination. Despite evidence that she actually attempted to prevent the murder, she was tried and sentenced to prison à perpétuité. Conspiracy theories abound regarding King Henri's assassination, and the unfortunate Dame d'Escaumont figures in many of them. Combalet, Marie-Madeleine de Vignerot du Pont de Coulay, Madame de Combalet, 1604 to 1675. Marie de Vignerot was one of Cardinal Richelieu's several nieces, and of them certainly his favourite. In 1620, she was married to the Sieur de Combalet, a nephew of then-Constable de Luynes. It was a sad mismatch, and after he died in 1622, the widow Combalet became a Carmelite nun, and swore off marriage and men. But she developed a taste for high society, and thanks to her position as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Mother Marie de Medici, due to Richelieu's influence, every door was opened to her. She became a habituée of the Rambouillet salons, a patron of the arts and artists, and very probably Richelieu's mistress. Her hand was sought by a series of great nobles seeking an alliance with the cardinal minister, but nothing ever came of these courtships, and indeed she didn't need a high-ranking husband, as she was made Duchesse d'Aiguillon in her own right in 1638 for her services to the state. After the cardinal died, she withdrew from high society but continued her patronage of the arts and sciences, sponsoring mathematicians, poets, and writers, including Pierre Corneille, whose breakthrough play, The Cid, was dedicated to her. Concini, Concino Concini, Maréchal d'Ancre, 1575 to 1617. Concini was a handsome Italian courtier who was a favourite of Queen Marie de Medici. During Marie's regency, after her husband, King Henri IV, was assassinated, the arrogant Concini was showered with posts and preferment, including the Marquisate of Ancre, governorships of numerous provinces and cities, and the baton of a marshal, though he had no military experience. He lorded it over the French nobility, and they cordially hated him for it, no one more than young King Louis XIII, whose mother made him defer to Lord Concini. Luynes, the young king's favourite, engineered Louis's rise to power and his own, when he orchestrated Concini's public assassination in 1617. Condé, Prince. Henri II de Bourbon, Prince de Condé, Monsieur le Prince, 1588 to 1646. Head of the cadet line of the Bourbon dynasty, Condé was second in line for the throne after Prince Gaston, and spent a life of power and privilege wallowing in royal entitlements despite his negligible abilities and obnoxious personality. Condé, Princess. Charlotte Marguerite de Montmorency, Princesse de Condé, Madame la Princesse, 1594 to 1650. For many years, the reigning beauty of the French court, Charlotte de Montmorency's charms were first noticed by the roving eye of King Henri IV, who intended to make her the next in his series of royal mistresses by marrying her in 1609 to his cousin, the Prince de Condé. This was intended to keep her near at hand, but Charlotte was having none of it. Rather than submit to the aging Henri's advances, she fled with her new husband to the Low Countries. After Henri's assassination, the Condés returned to France, where they became leaders of the fractious nobles opposed to the Queen Mother's elevation of Concini, so much so that Marie had them both imprisoned, though they were freed after Louis XIII came to power. During Louis's reign, Charlotte gloried in her role as Madame la Princesse, and was loyal to her thoroughly unpleasant husband and the perquisites that came with being his wife. She was the mother of Anne Geneviève de Bourbon, later Duchesse de Longueville, and Louis de Condé, called the Grand Condé, both major historical figures who will play key roles later in the Musketeers cycle. Corneille, Pierre Corneille, 1606 to 1684. Son of a Norman lawyer, Corneille's talents as a poet and playwright brought him to the attention of Cardinal Richelieu, who made him one of the 5 poets who collaborated on his literary projects. But Corneille's literary ambitions and abilities exceeded those of his patron, and he broke with Richelieu over the innovations in his play The Cid, 1637. Corneille's play is considered one of the greatest French tragedies of the 17th century, a precursor of the work of Racine and Molière, and was just the beginning of the poet's successes. Dumas revered him. Créqui, Charles I de Blanchefort, Marquis de Créqui, Prince de Poix, Duc de Lesdiguières, Governor of Dauphiné and Marshal of France, 1578 to 1638. Maréchal de Créqui came of a noble and military family, and thought he deserved to be Constable of France, but though a talented general, he was a poor politician, and often found himself on the wrong side of quarrels with the king and cardinal. Delorme, Marion Delorme, or de Lorme, or Delorme, 1613 to 1650. A witty, irreverent, sophisticated and beautiful French courtesan, Marion was renowned for her liaisons with the high and mighty, including, it was rumoured, Cardinal Richelieu. She was too young in 1629 to play the part assigned to her in The Red Sphinx, but Dumas had few scruples about adjusting the historical record if it meant he could add a fascinating character to his cast, and though she did have a house in the Place Royale, it was some time after Richelieu had his residence there. Épernon, Jean-Louis de Nogaret de la Valette, Duc d'Épernon, 1554 to 1642. One of King Henri III's notorious favourites, de Mignon, d'Épernon was elevated to the peerage at an early age, and acted thereafter as a monster of pride and entitlement who caused nothing but trouble throughout the reigns of Henri IV and Louis XIII. Though implicated by rumour in the assassination of King Henri, he was a key supporter of Queen Mother Marie de Medici during her regency, so long as plenty of money flowed from the royal treasury into his pockets. Though, by all accounts, a capable politician, in every other way, d'Épernon was a thoroughly nasty character. Escomont, see Coetmont. Fargy, Madeleine de Silly, Madame de Fargy, Marina, died 1639. Though he disliked and distrusted women, the reign of Louis XIII abounded with clever, brave and free-spirited ladies, an irony that wasn't lost on Dumas, who wrote them in wherever possible. Lafargue was smart, talented, irreverent, and mischievous, and Dumas couldn't resist making her drop-dead gorgeous into the bargain, though she didn't need looks to enthrall her impressive roster of high-ranking lovers. As a young woman, her amorous adventures scandalized her father, who sent her to a Carmelite convent to straighten her out, but it didn't take. When he died, she rejoined the salons of Parisian society, and soon captivated Charles d'Angennes, Comte de Fargy, who promptly married her and carried her off to Madrid, where he'd been appointed as French ambassador. After outraging the prim and prudish court of Philip IV for 4 years, she returned with her husband to Paris, right about the time the king had banished the Duchesse de Chevreuse from Queen Anne's household, and Richelieu was looking for someone to replace her. Madame de Combalet admired Lafargue's brains and wit, and recommended her to the cardinal, who sponsored her to the role. But once in Her Majesty's household, she quickly gained Anne's trust and transferred her loyalty to the Queen. To Richelieu's displeasure, Fargy soon became almost as troublesome as Madame de Chevreuse. Ferdinand II, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, 1578 to 1637. Head of the House of Habsburg, Catholic overlord of the Germans, and distant uncle to Anne of Austria, Ferdinand was the archenemy of Protestantism in Europe and as responsible for the bloodbath of the 30 Years' War as anyone. Gaston, Prince Gaston de Bourbon, Duc d'Orléans, Monsieur, 1608 to 1660. Younger brother to Louis XIII and first heir to the throne, favourite son of Marie de Medici, Gaston seems to have had no redeeming characteristics whatsoever. Proud, greedy, ambitious for the throne, but an arrant coward, he was the figurehead in one conspiracy after another against the king and cardinal. These plots failed every time, after which Gaston invariably betrayed his co-conspirators in return for immunity from consequences, because as the healthy heir to a chronically unhealthy king, he knew his life was sacrosanct. Despite his being a worm, the great nobles turned to him time and again in their long struggle to resist France's transition to absolute monarchy, and he was too weak to resist joining any plot that might put him on the throne. Gonzague, Princesse Marie Louise de Gonzague, Gonzaga, 1611 to 1667. Daughter of the Duc de Nevers, and a mere ingenue at the time of the Red Sphinx, her status as the probable heir to the Duchy of Mantua made her a handsome prize to whoever might win her hand. Prince Gaston made a play for her, and though it was almost certainly insincere, her marriage to Monsieur would have given him a power base outside the country. This was an outcome the king and cardinal dared not risk, so they placed Marie under virtual house arrest for a while to take her out of circulation. Though treated as a pawn in the Mantua affair, she had considerable brains and willpower behind her undoubted good looks, and she carved out an independent life for herself in Parisian high society throughout the 1630s. In 1639, Cardinal Mazarin finally strong-armed her into a political marriage with the King of Poland, where she surprised everybody by taking an active role in Polish politics, leading that country ably through difficult times. Gournay, Marie Legare, Damoiselle de Gournay, 1565 to 1645. A novelist, poet, and essayist, de Gournay was one of France's most important early female writers, and a far more capable person than Dumas' rather condescending depiction would indicate. A protégée and adopted daughter of Michel de Montaigne, she supported herself entirely through her writing, though late in life she did receive an honorary stipend from Cardinal Richelieu. She wrote forcefully and persistently on behalf of equality of the sexes. She never married. Guise, Charles, Duc de Guise, 1571 to 1640. Though the House of Guise in Lorraine reached its height of power in France during the Wars of Religion in the late 16th century, when the Guises led the Catholic League, they retained considerable wealth and prestige well into the reign of Louis XIV. Charles, the fourth Duc de Guise, was past his prime by 1629, and was known mainly for his lechery and overweening self-importance. Gustavus Adolphus, Gustav II Adolf, King of Sweden, 1594 to 1632. Widely regarded as the greatest military commander of the 17th century, King Gustav led Sweden to victory in the 30 Years' War and established his country as a great power. A dynamic, larger-than-life figure who led his troops from the front, Dumas admired him without reservation, perhaps because Gustavus reminded him of his own father, the famous General Dumas, who commanded an army for Napoleon. Hautefort, Mademoiselle Marie de Hautefort, Aurora, 1616 to 1691. First brought to court in 1630 as a maid of honour to the Queen Mother, Marie soon joined the household of Queen Anne, where she pulled off the astounding trick of becoming close friend and confidant of both the King and the Queen. Her relationship with King Louis was platonic, and she seems to have been a genuinely good person who had only the best interests of Louis and Anne at heart. This baffled everyone. Nobody knew what to do about it. Henri de Bourbon of Navarre, King Henri IV. Henri the Great, 1553 to 1610. A complex and towering figure, a warrior king and, at the same time, a beloved man of the people, Henri IV ended the wars of religion, united France, and made it one of the great powers of Europe. His life and death overshadow every aspect of the Red Sphinx, as his royal sons, Louis, Gaston, and Antoine, Comte de Moray, and his greatest political disciple, Cardinal Richelieu, all struggle with Henri's legacy, and try to define their roles in light of it. Isabelle, Mademoiselle Isabelle de Lautrec, the lady love of the Comte de Moray, is an invention of Dumas. She first appeared in The Dove, in which she is arguably the protagonist, and Dumas liked her well enough to revive the character for the Red Sphinx. Joseph, François Leclerc du Tremblay, Father Joseph, Richelieu's Eminence Grise, 1577 to 1638. Capuchin monk, Christian mystic, politician, diplomat, and spymaster, Père Joseph was one of the most fascinating men of his age. The phrase Eminence Grise, for a shadowy adviser, derives from his role. He was the grey eminence to the cardinal's red eminence. Though he was undeniably effective, in person many found the intensity of his presence disquieting, even repellent. In short, if you imagine him as Peter Lorre at his creepiest, you won't be far wrong. But smart, hellish smart. His brother, Charles du Tremblay, was governor of the Bastille, which was convenient, given Joseph's role as Richelieu's spymaster. King, see Louis. L'Angely, see Angely. Lautrec, see Isabelle. Longueville, Catherine de Gonzague, Duchesse de Longueville, the Dowager Duchess, 1568 to 1629. A fierce old relic, tempered in the previous century's wars of religion, the Dowager Duchess was left in charge of the young Princess Marie de Gonzague, when the rest of House Nevers went off to the Duchy of Mantua to stake the family claim to the throne. Lopez, Alphonse, not Ildefonse, Lopez, 1582 to 1649. Persecuted in Spain for his Moorish, or possibly Jewish descent, Lopez came to Paris in 1604, where he became a fashionable jewel merchant and possibly moneylender to French high society. Louis, King Louis XIII, His Most Christian Majesty of France, Louis the Just, 1601 to 1643. Dumas wrote a great deal about Louis XIII and his reign, most of it quite accurate, thanks to the research of his assistant, Auguste Maquet. Dumas had a good grasp of the melancholy king's character and portrayed it well. Luynes, Charles d'Albert, Duc de Luynes, 1578 to 1621. The young King Louis's falconer and first favourite, Luynes engineered the assassination of Concini, which ended Queen Marie's regency and put Louis XIII on the throne. The king rewarded Luynes by making him first a duke and then Constable of France. Luynes was the first husband of Marie de Rohan, later Duchesse de Chevreuse. Marie, see Gonzague or Medici or Combalet or Chevreuse. Mazarin, Giulio Raimondo Mazzarino, Captain Mazzarino Mazzarini, later Cardinal Mazarin, 1602 to 1661. Mazarin was a protégé of Richelieu, and succeeded him as Cardinal and Prime Minister during the regency of Anne of Austria. He did, in fact, first meet Richelieu while acting as a papal envoy during the War of Mantuan Succession, and was instrumental in crafting the treaty that ended that conflict. You will find him described in ample detail in 20 Years After, the next novel in Dumas' Musketeers cycle. Medici, Queen Mother Marie de Medici, 1575 to 1642. Marie was the second queen to France's King Henri IV, who married her in 1600 in a desperate search for an heir, after the infertile Queen Marguerite was set aside. A nasty piece of work. Marie inherited all the ambition, pride, greed, and ruthlessness of the Medici, but none of their brains or finesse. However, she did give King Henri the royal heirs he wanted, including Louis XIII, whom Marie dominated but never liked much, and the worthless Prince Gaston, on whom she doted. Whether she actually helped conspire in the assassination of her husband, nobody can say for sure, but she was certainly capable of it. Marion, see Delorme. Michel, see Sucarière. Mirabelle, Don Antonio de Zuniga y Davila, 3rd Marquis of Mirabel, Spanish ambassador to France, 1580 to 1647. A scion of the House of Zuniga, who served the kings of Spain as diplomats for generations, the Marquis of Mirabel was a suave and accomplished envoy who acted as liaison between Anne of Austria and her brother, King Philip IV. Monsieur, see Gaston. Montmorency. Henri II, Duc de Montmorency, Governor of Languedoc, Marshal of France, the Maréchal Duc, 1595 to 1632. Head of the Montmorency family, one of the greatest noble houses of France, and heir to a grand military tradition. Henri's driving goal was to become constable, that is, Chief General of France, like his father and grandfather before him, and in fact he was a capable military leader. Handsome, well-mannered, and personable, he was popular at court, though the king didn't like him because he felt Montmorency was too warm in his attentions to Queen Anne. He hesitated to speak in public due to a slight stutter. When others around him were being witty, Montmorency would just bow and smile, which gave him a reputation for wisdom that was perhaps undeserved. Like many of the grands seigneurs, Montmorency's great sin was pride. He held to the old conviction that when the nobles' rights and privileges were trespassed upon, they had a right to revolt, to restore them, as the king was really no more than the leading member of the nobility. After the Day of Dupes, in late 1630, confirmed Richelieu as Prime Minister and Louis as absolute monarch, that time was over, but Montmorency failed to get the memo, and joined Prince Gaston in one last nobles' revolt in 1632. He paid with his head, and leadership of House Montmorency passed to his sister Charlotte, Princesse de Condé. Moret, Antoine de Bourbon, Comte de Moret, Jacquelino, 1607 to 1632. Son of King Henri IV, and half-brother to Louis XIII, Moret doesn't appear much in the historical record, which means at least there's little to contradict the adventures Dumas recounts in The Red Sphinx, and that's good enough for Dumas. Moret was trained for a career in the church, and was nominal head of several abbacies, but he didn't have the temperament to be a priest, and by age 16 he was in Paris pursuing beautiful women, following in the footsteps of his father, whom he closely resembled. Moret was said to have had a teenage crush on Madame de Chevreuse, but it was a rare cavalier who crossed paths with Marie de Rohan, who didn't fall for her. He joined the circle of chivalrous nobles who congregated around the Duc de Montmorency, and might very well have gone along with the Maréchal Duc on the French expeditions to Savoy in 1629 to 1630, but we're not sure. What we do know is that he joined Montmorency's rebellion in support of Prince Gaston in 1632, and when that revolt was put down at the Battle of Castelnaudary, he was killed. Or was he? Rumours persisted throughout the 17th century that Moret was only wounded at Castelnaudary, and then went into hiding to avoid Montmorency's fate at the executioner's block, living under an assumed name as a monk or religious hermit. His supposed survival became the stuff of a number of romantic novels, and in The Dove, Dumas was already treading a well-worn path. Nevers, Charles de Gonzague, Duc de Nevers, Duke of Mantua and Montferrat, 1580 to 1637. Even among the dukes of France, who were the least humble of men, Nevers was known for his pride and vainglory. At one time or another, he offended nearly every prominent member of the French nobility. Tracing his descent back to the emperors of Byzantium, Nevers claimed to be heir to the throne of Constantinople, at that time capital of the Ottoman Empire, and actually tried to raise support in Europe for a new crusade, to recapture the Near East for Christendom and make him its ruler. Father Joseph was one of his few supporters in this folly. When Duke Vincenzo of Mantua died in 1627, Nevers was named his heir, and though nobody liked him much, Cardinal Richelieu endorsed his claim as a matter of state, and persuaded Louis XIII to commit to supporting it. Orléans. See Gaston. Philip. Philip IV, His Most Catholic Majesty the King of Spain, 1605 to 1665. The dour monarch who reigned over the decline of the Spanish Empire, Philip's wife was King Louis's sister Elizabeth, as Louis's wife was Philip's sister Anne. The four of them wed in a double marriage arranged by Queen Mother Marie de Medici. These marriages failed to fulfill Marie's dream of making the two monarchs friends and allies, as their policies were invariably opposed. Pisani, Louis Pompeo d'Angen, Marquis de Pisani, 1615 to 1645. Pisani, second son of the celebrated Marquis de Rambouillet, was a little too young to be chasing women and stabbing sellswords in 1629, but Dumas adjusted history a bit once again to enable him to write a juicy character into the Red Sphinx. An incurable romantic, frustrated by his hunched back and ugly features, he was probably less obstreperous than Dumas makes out, though he was given to writing sarcastic verses about his contemporaries. Ponty, Emmanuel, Vicomte de Ponty, the engineer-geographer, who is Maret's rival for the affections of Isabelle de Lautrec, was probably based on Louis de Ponty, 1583 to 1670, a career military man from Provence, who spent 50 years in the French army, served under Richelieu, and left behind memoirs that are still in print. Queen C.N. Rambouillet, Catherine de Vivonne, Marquise de Rambouillet, 1588 to 1665. The Marquise's literary and society salons at the Hôtel de Rambouillet are justly celebrated as the crucible of modern French art and manners. Her kindness and generosity were boundless, especially to penniless writers, and in a society in which character assassination was a spectator sport, no one ever had a bad word to say about her. It is not too much to say that, by respecting French artists, she made French art respectable. Ravaillac, François Ravaillac, 1578 to 1610. Ravaillac was the Catholic fanatic who, in Paris, on May 14, 1610, leaped onto Henri IV's open carriage and stabbed the king to death. Political assassinations by Catholic fanatics were so common in Renaissance and early modern France that it was practically a tradition, and Ravaillac was part of a pattern. If you led a Catholic movement, you had a murderous zealot being stoked up somewhere in the background, ready to be unleashed on your opponent if the political situation grew desperate. Ravaillac was the last such holy regicide, in France at least, as he slew a king so broadly popular that the public backlash was terrifying. Who sponsored him, and was he acting on their command, or had he simply waited too long for orders that never came and decided to act on his own? We'll almost certainly never know, because after his execution all the evidence appears, even at this remove, to have been systematically destroyed. There are any number of conspiracy theories to explain what few facts we have. Dumas, as usual, seized on the theory that best suited the purposes of his story. Richelieu, Armand Jean Duplessis, Cardinal de Richelieu, Monsieur le Cardinal, 1585 to 1642. Louis XIII's incomparable Prime Minister, one of the two most important Frenchmen of the 17th century, exceeded only by Louis XIV. Richelieu has been the subject of scores of biographies, including one by Dumas, and his life and works have been analysed in excruciating detail, starting with his own memoir. His deeds were momentous, but it was his character and personality that interested Dumas, who loved historical figures who were great but also greatly flawed. After deploying Richelieu in The Three Musketeers as the worthy antagonist of his most enduring heroes, Dumas couldn't resist revisiting the Cardinal by making him a protagonist in The Red Sphinx. He admired his man of genius, but didn't shy away from portraying Richelieu's darker side, his vanity, ruthlessness, and bouts of near-crippling insecurity. It's important to note that during the events of 1629 to 1630, portrayed in The Red Sphinx, the Cardinal was not yet the all-powerful Prime Minister he would be in the final 12 years of Louis's reign. He was still vulnerable to domestic enemies great and small, and time and again came within a hair's breadth of banishment or assassination. Though gone from Dumas' Musketeer cycle after The Red Sphinx, Richelieu nonetheless casts a long shadow over the rest of the series, from 20 years after all the way through The Man in the Iron Mask. Rossignol, Antoine Rossignol Desroches, 1600 to 1682. Richelieu's brilliant cryptographer entered his service during the siege of La Rochelle, after he broke the rebellious Huguenot ciphers in record time. He stayed with the Cardinal throughout his ministry, served Mazarin after Richelieu's death, and then Louis XIV, once the Sun King came into his own. Rossignols' innovations and refinements made French cryptography the envy of Europe, and the grand cipher he invented continued to be used for 2 generations after his death by his son and grandson, who followed in his footsteps as royal codemasters. After the death of Antoine Bonaventure, the last of the Rossignols, nobody was left alive who could figure out how to use the grand cipher, and its secrets weren't solved until the late 19th century. Rotrou, Jean Rotrou, 1609 to 1650. One of the Cardinal's 5 poets, Rotrou, like Corneille, was a bourgeois from Normandy who came to Paris to make it as a playwright. A talented but rather conservative writer, he avoided the innovations that made Corneille's work so controversial. Rotrou's plays were solid and successful, but he was no Corneille or Racine, let alone Molière. Saint-Simon, Claude de Rouvroy, Sieur de Saint-Simon, 1607 to 1693. First equerry to Louis XIII, and the page who followed Baradat as the king's favourite. Saint-Simon was sufficiently clever and deferential to stay in favour long enough to be made a duke. His son Louis, one of the Sun King's courtiers, would write one of the leading memoirs of the 17th century. He appears in a prominent role in The Vicomte de Bragelonne, later in the Musketeers' cycle. Savoy, Charles Emmanuel I, the Duke of Savoy, Prince of Marmots, 1562 to 1630. Charles Emmanuel ruled the small interstitial state of Savoy for 50 years, and in pursuit of his lifetime goal of expanding his duchy into a kingdom, got his small realm into one conflict after another. He never succeeded in making Savoy a great power, but on the other hand he maintained its independence during his entire reign, which was no small feat given Savoy's strategic location and powerful neighbours. Though reckless in his youth, he grew cunning with age and experience, and was every bit as wily as Dumas portrays him. Soucarrière, Sieur Pierre de Bellegarde, Marquis de Montbrun, Seigneur de Soucarrière, Monsieur Michel, 1595 to 1670. One of the cleverest rogues of his time, Soucarrière had an entire chapter devoted to him in the gossipy Historiette of Tallemant de Réau, and his exploits were the subject of one of Coutril's de Sandras's lurid pseudo-biographies. A man of low birth who connived his way into the nobility, managing to hobnob with the high and mighty like one of their own, the actual facts of his background are a matter of some dispute, but the remarkable story related by Richelieu in The Red Sphinx is close enough, even if some of the details are off. He was, in fact, responsible for popularizing in Paris the enclosed English version of the sedan chair, the monopoly for which was shared between him and Capitaine de Cavois. Sully, Maximilien de Bethune, Baron de Rosny, Duc de Sully, Prime Minister to King Henri IV, 1560 to 1641. Sully was Prince Henri of Navarre's right-hand man during the Wars of Religion, and continued in that capacity after the prince became King Henri IV. Born a Huguenot, he advised his co-religionist Henri to adopt Catholicism in order to rule effectively, though he remained a Protestant himself all his life. But stubbornness was central to his character, and a large part of what made him successful as Henri's chief minister of state, that and a tight fist on the royal funds. His sharp tongue made him a lot of enemies, and though he survived his master, King Henri, by 30 years, they were lonely ones. Richelieu was an admirer of Sully, and adopted some of his methods, where he thought them appropriate to the new century. The Hôtel de Sully, near the Place Royale, is now a museum and is still much as it's described by Dumas. Vautier, François Vautier, or Vautier, or Voltier, confidential physician to Marie de Medici, 1580 to 1652. The Queen Mother's conspirator-in-chief, whom Richelieu called in his memoirs the principal and most dangerous agent in the entire faction, was in fact an actual medical doctor of some renown. Though his treasonous career led Richelieu to eventually throw him in the Bastille, after the death of Louis XIII he was released and restored to favour, and ended up as the respected physician to young King Louis XIV during the regency of Anne of Austria. Victor Amadeus, Victor Amadeus I, Prince of Piedmont, 1587 to 1637. Victor Amadeus was raised largely at the Spanish court in Madrid, and then married a French princess, King Louis's sister Christine, all of which helped him to assist in Savoy's eternal dance between France and Spain, a dance he continued as Savoy's ruler after the death of his father, Duke Charles Emmanuel. Handsome and personable, he was an effective diplomat, and fortunately did not inherit the consuming ambition that drove his father to drag Savoy into one war after another. Voiture. Vincent Voiture, 1597 to 1648. The most popular poet among the habitués of the Hôtel de Rambouillet, favourite of the ladies, and an intimate crony of Prince Gaston, Voiture was arguably more successful as a courtier than he was as a versifier. Indeed, despite his association with the hated Gaston, his tact and deference enabled him to mend fences with Cardinal Richelieu and become one of the earliest members of the Académie Française. A master of sly innuendo and the poetic in-joke, he knew just how far he could go in lampooning his patrons among the great nobles, and was the witty and insolent upstart you most wanted to have as a guest at your high society soirée. This concludes the reading of The Red Sphinx, or The Comte de Moray, a sequel to The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. Translation and original material copyright 2017 by Lawrence Schick. This book was read by John Lee. This unabridged recording was published by arrangement with Pegasus Books and was produced in 2017 by Blackstone Audio Inc., which holds the copyright. Neither this recording nor any portion of it may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authorization from Blackstone Audio Inc. If you would like to obtain a monthly update telling you about new releases, call 1-800-SAY-BOOK. That's 1-800-729-2665. For a complete listing of our titles, visit our website at www.downpour.com. Thank you.